The most dangerous weapons are not the ones you can see, because they don't attack your body, they seize control of your mind. They are the sophisticated poisons of manipulation, the invisible cages of control, and the strings pulled by those who wish to dominate. In the next 100 topics, we will dissect every technique and unmask every manipulator. Because this isn't just psychology, this is psychological warfare. Like this video and subscribe to arm yourself for the battle ahead. 1. The unbearable weight of nothing. Silence as the ultimate power move. In a world addicted to noise, validation, and constant chatter, silence has become the ultimate and most underestimated psychological weapon. We are conditioned to fill empty space. Conversation is a rhythm, a back-and-forth volley. When one person suddenly withholds their part, the rhythm breaks, and a profound, unsettling pressure is created. This pressure is the weapon. Humans are fundamentally uncomfortable with a void. This discomfort stems from a primal place. In the wild, unexpected silence often meant a predator was near. Socially, it's interpreted as disapproval, judgment, or disinterest. The person wielding silence exploits this, forcing the other party to confront not the manipulator, but themselves. They are left alone under a harsh spotlight, their own insecurities and doubts echoing in the quiet. In an argument, silence is an instant and devastating power shift. The person who is shouting, defending, or explaining is spending energy. They are revealing their hand, their emotional state, and their desperation to be understood. The person who remains quiet does the opposite. They conserve energy, reveal nothing, and assume the posture of a judge. This calm refusal to engage makes the aggressor scramble. They cannot bear the crushing weight of the quiet, so they begin to over-explain, backtrack, and doubt themselves. They essentially start arguing against their own points, desperately trying to elicit a response that the silent party strategically withholds. They will reveal more than they intended, expose their weaknesses, and ultimately exhaust their own position, all because the silence forced them to do all the work. In negotiation, this tactic is just as lethal. After an offer is made, a skilled negotiator will simply remain silent. The pause stretches. The person who made the offer, now sitting in that unbearable void, begins to second-guess. Was the offer too low? Did I offend them? They feel a rising panic to break the tension, and they often do so by bidding against themselves, sweetening the deal, or exposing their true limits without the other side ever having to ask. Silence, in this context, is not passive. It is an active, aggressive interrogation that pulls the truth from an opponent without you ever having to push. 2. The gaze of control, wielding eye contact as a psychological weapon. Long before our ancestors spoke a word, they communicated through the gaze. It is our most primal, powerful, and unsettling form of nonverbal communication. The human brain is hardwired to treat eye contact as a direct line to intention, truth, and power. It is a sign of attention, a predator-prey dynamic, and a tool of connection all at once. Because it is so deeply embedded in our psyche, it is an incredibly effective psychological weapon. Most social interactions are governed by an unspoken rule. We glance, we connect, and we look away. This brief break relieves the inherent tension of the direct gaze. Eye contact dominance is the deliberate violation of this rule. When you lock eyes with someone and refuse to be the first to break away, you send an unmistakable, primal message. I am in control. I am not intimidated. I am the dominant force in this interaction. This sustained gaze is a psychological assault. The target begins to feel exposed, as if their social mask is being penetrated and their thoughts are being pulled to the surface. Their heart rate may quicken, their palms sweat, and their voice may falter. They are instinctively thrown into a freeze response, struggling to maintain composure while you remain unmoved. In this unspoken war, the first person to look away has surrendered. They have non-verbally communicated, you are in charge. This can be used for intimidation, but it is also a powerful tool of seduction. A deep, unwavering gaze creates a sense of profound intimacy and bypasses rational thought, making the target feel seen and desired. But whether for fear or attraction, the mechanism is the same. Control. It is also crucial to note cultural context. In many Western cultures, strong eye contact is valued as a sign of confidence and honesty. However, in many Asian and Middle Eastern cultures, that same sustained gaze is a profound sign of disrespect and aggression. The true weapon lies in understanding and controlling this dynamic. By mastering your gaze, you control the unspoken battlefield of human interaction, asserting authority and dominance without ever saying a word. 3. The Psychic's Secret. How cold reading manufactures omniscience. Cold reading is the art of appearing to see straight into someone's soul, and it is one of the most masterful deceptions in psychology. It is the primary tool of stage psychics, fortune tellers, and mentalists, but it is also used by salespeople, con artists, and seducers. It works by exploiting one of the deepest, most universal human hungers, the desperate need to be seen, understood, and validated. The manipulator appears to have this rare insight, and in doing so, they can build a sense of fascination, trust, and vulnerability in their victim almost instantly. At its core, cold reading is a sophisticated blend of 3 techniques. The first is the use of Barnum statements, named after P.T. Barnum, who said a good circus has something for everyone. These are vague, universal statements that feel personal but apply to nearly anyone. You have a deep need for other people to like and admire you, but you tend to be critical of yourself. You can be an extrovert, but there are times when you are very shy and reserved. The target, hearing this, thinks, "Wow, that's exactly me." They feel singled out, believing the reader has uncovered a hidden truth, when in fact they've just been handed a one-size-fits-all description. The second technique is subtle observation. The reader glances at clothing, posture, jewelry, and mannerisms to make educated guesses. A faint tan line on a ring finger. You've recently suffered a loss or the end of a relationship. The third and most critical part is how the reader refines their statements. They don't just talk. They watch. They throw out a vague probe and watch how the target reacts. A widened eye, a quick intake of breath, a subtle nod. These are confirmations. The reader then doubles down on that line of inquiry. If a probe gets no reaction, they discard it and move on. The person being read is actually doing all the work, feeding the reader a stream of nonverbal cues, while believing the reader is pulling secrets from thin air. 4. The first number wins. Hijacking perception with cognitive anchoring. The human brain is lazy. To navigate a complex world, it relies on mental shortcuts or heuristics. One of the most powerful and easily exploitable of these shortcuts is the anchoring bias. This is a psychological weapon that seizes control of perception by planting a single reference point in someone's mind, making it the foundation for every decision that follows. The brain hates a vacuum. It will latch onto the first piece of information it receives, no matter how arbitrary or irrational, and use it as an anchor to measure all subsequent information. This tactic is lethal in negotiations. The person who makes the first offer, or sets the anchor, controls the entire framework of the discussion. If a seller asks for $500,000 for a house, that number becomes the reference point. Even if the house is only worth $400,000, the buyer will likely be pulled up from their ideal price, and their counteroffer will revolve around that initial, inflated figure. They may get the house for $470,000 and feel like they won, never realizing they were manipulated from the first sentence. The anchor doesn't even have to be relevant. In a famous study, subjects were asked to guess the number of African nations in the UN, but only after spinning a wheel of fortune that landed on a random number. People who landed on a high number from the wheel gave significantly higher guesses than those who landed on a low number, The random number anchored their perception. Marketers use this constantly. A clothing store places a $2,000 handbag at the front. The goal isn't to sell that bag. It's to anchor your perception of value, so the $300 shirt next to it suddenly feels like a bargain. A restaurant menu features a $150 market price lobster to make the $45 steak seem reasonable. But anchoring isn't just about numbers. It shapes emotions and identity. Tell someone, "You are the strongest person I know," and you have anchored them to that identity. They will now unconsciously strive to live up to that label, bending their behavior to match your anchor. This is how you make it impossible for them to think outside the shadow you've cast. 5. The Chameleon's Gambit. Building artificial rapport through mirroring. At the heart of all human connection is a simple subconscious principle. We trust people who are like us. This is the foundation of rapport. But in the hands of a manipulator, this foundation becomes a weapon. Mirroring is the psychological art of forging an instant, artificial connection by reflecting another person's behavior back at them. This bypasses conscious awareness and strikes directly at the subconscious, creating a powerful illusion of deep understanding and trust. Our brains are equipped with mirror neurons, the biological basis for empathy. When we see someone smile, our own smile muscles twitch. When we see someone in pain, we wince. Mirroring weaponizes this natural process, turning it from a passive instinct into a conscious strategy. This is not just imitation, it's calibration. The manipulator subtly adopts their target's body language. If the target leans in, the manipulator leans in a few moments later. If the target crosses their legs, so does the manipulator. This extends to speech rhythms and vocabulary. They will match the target's tone of voice, their pace of speaking, and even adopt their choice of words. To the target, this feels incredibly validating. They believe they have discovered a kindred spirit, someone who just gets them. This sense of familiarity and safety makes them drop their guard, open up, and reveal information they otherwise would not. Con artists, seducers, and master persuaders use this to build rapid, unearned trust before they exploit it. Former FBI hostage negotiators report using mirroring as a primary tool. By mirroring the speech and emotions of a person in crisis, they convey empathy and validation, de-escalating the situation and building a bridge of trust that allows for influence. But whether used for a therapeutic good or a manipulative evil, the effect is the same. It is a disarming, magnetic, and dangerously effective way to step inside someone's psychological world, making them drop their guard and open the doors you choose to walk through. 6. The Backhanded Wound. Destabilizing confidence with negging. Negging is a psychological weapon that disguises itself as humor, wit, or playful teasing, but its true purpose is to destabilize self-esteem and create a craving for validation. It is a backhanded compliment, or a subtle insult delivered with a smile, a neg designed to confuse the target and lower their perceived value while elevating the manipulators. This tactic was codified by the pickup artist community, who designed it as a way to disarm attractive individuals who are accustomed to fawning praise. A direct compliment would get lost in the noise, but a neg, such as "those are nice shoes," but they look almost comfortable, plants a seed of insecurity. The target is caught in an emotional trap. The delivery is charming, but the words have a sting. This creates cognitive dissonance. Did they just insult me? Or was that a joke? The brain, desperate to resolve this ambiguity, pushes the person to win back social approval. They lean in. They laugh it off. They try harder to prove their worth. They are now, without realizing it, seeking the manipulator's validation. This is the entire goal. Negging is a manipulation tactic designed to instantly shift power. It pulls the high-status person down just enough so they are looking upward, seeking approval from the very person who undermined them. It exploits one of the most primal human needs, the need to feel value. By striking at confidence and then dangling intermittent approval, The manipulator makes their target chase after their respect. The cycle creates dependency. Criticism mixed with crumbs of validation keeps people hooked, like an addict searching for their next high. What makes negging so dangerous is its invisibility. It hides under the guise of "I'm just kidding" or "you're too sensitive," which is a secondary gaslighting tactic. But its effects are deeply felt, eroding self-worth while tightening the manipulator's grip, growing into a seed of doubt and submission. 7. The erosion of reality. How gaslighting makes you doubt your own mind. Gaslighting is one of the most insidious and destructive psychological weapons. It is not about a single explosive lie. It is a slow, deliberate twisting of reality designed to make a victim doubt their own mind, their memory, and their sanity. The term originates from the 1944 film Gaslight, in which a husband methodically manipulates his wife into believing she is going insane, in part by dimming the gas lights in their home, and then insisting she is imagining the flicker. This is the perfect metaphor for the tactic, a subtle, persistent erosion of certainty. The torment of gaslighting lies in its subtlety. It is a war fought with small denials, quiet contradictions, and calculated misdirection. It is the manipulator insisting that never happened, you're imagining things, or you're just being too sensitive. When this is repeated often enough, the victim begins to question their own recollections. What was once a clear memory becomes blurry and uncertain. They replay events in their mind. Did I remember that wrong? Am I overreacting? The moment a victim begins to second-guess themselves, the gaslighter tightens their grip. This weapon is devastating because it exploits the most fundamental human need: to be able to trust one's own judgment. When that trust is broken, the victim clings desperately to whoever seems more certain. The gaslighter, who has manufactured this chaos, positions themselves as the one singular anchor of reality. They become the voice of reason amid the confusion they created. The victim, now convinced the problem lies within them, surrenders their perception of truth to the manipulator. They apologize, shrink, and reshape themselves, no longer believing they ever had the power or clarity to be right. It is a war fought in perception itself, where the victim hands over their power because they know have been convinced they never had it. 8. The story wins, controlling reality by reframing the narrative. Facts are just data. They are cold, neutral, and on their own, relatively powerless. The human mind does not run on facts. It runs on meaning. We are narrative creatures, and we rush to assign a story to everything that happens. This is good. This is bad. This is a tragedy. This is a triumph. Reframing is a psychological weapon that transforms reality not by changing the facts, but by hijacking the lens through which those facts are seen. It is the power to take a single event, and by altering the story wrapped around it, completely change its emotional impact and meaning. A project fails. One frame. This is a disaster that proves our incompetence. A reframe. This was a necessary stress test that revealed the exact weaknesses we need to fix to win. The facts are identical, but the emotional reality has been rewritten. This tool can be used for profound good, as in cognitive behavioral therapy, where a therapist helps you reframe, "I am a failure," into, "I learned a valuable lesson." This is reframing for resilience. But in the hands of a manipulator, this tool is devastating. Politicians are masters of this. A scandal is reframed as a partisan witch hunt, turning the politician into a victim. An expensive tax is reframed as a patriotic investment in our future. Marketers transform overpriced products into premium investments. And in its darkest form, abusers twist cruelty into love. I'm only controlling because I care so much about you, or I have to be this hard on you, so you can be strong. This reframes abuse as a twisted form of protection, forcing the victim to question their own pain. The human mind clings to meaning, and whoever controls the frame controls the narrative. And in the battle for influence, whoever controls the narrative controls the truth. 9. The power of cold. How emotional detachment makes you untouchable. The content of that human interaction is a dance of emotions. We react, we empathize, we get angry, we desire, and we seek validation. This emotional reactivity is the script of our social lives. Emotional detachment is the weapon you gain by tearing up that script. It is the deliberate act of stripping away your own emotional reactivity, standing as a fortress in the storm while others are slaves to it. This calm, calculated stillness is profoundly unsettling to people. They expect emotional feedback to measure their own power and influence. When they push, they expect you to push back. When they shout, they expect you to cower or shout in return. When you give them nothing, no anger, no fear, no desire, they are left off balance, questioning themselves. In conflict, emotional detachment disarms aggression. Anger feeds on reaction. It needs your fear, your defensiveness, or your own anger to survive. When you provide none, the attacker's anger has no target. It burns itself out like a fire with no oxygen. They may escalate, provoke, or push for a rise, but if you remain composed and unmoved, they begin to feel foolish and powerless. Their words lose weight, and their frustration turns inward. In negotiation, emotional detachment is lethal. Most people negotiate from a place of emotion, usually fear. Fear of losing the deal, fear of rejection, fear of missing out. The detached negotiator radiates an aura of control. They non-verbally communicate that they do not need this deal. They can, and will, walk away at any moment. The other side, sensing they cannot be pressured, quickly loses their leverage. They are forced into a position of weakness, often making concessions simply to win your engagement. This detachment also creates a powerful, mysterious allure in relationships. Showing too much emotional investment too quickly exposes vulnerabilities. By remaining slightly removed and difficult to read, you make others chase your approval, desperate to pierce the armor. You become untouchable. 10. The panic of last chance. Weaponizing the scarcity principle. The scarcity principle is a psychological weapon that preys on one of the deepest, most primal human fears, the fear of loss. The human brain is not wired to appreciate what is abundant. It is wired to obsess over what is limited. When people believe an opportunity is rare, a resource is dwindling, or time is running out, all logic and rational thought crumble. Desire, panic, and urgency take over. Scarcity doesn't just make things seem more valuable. It makes them feel essential, as if missing out would be a personal disaster. This is a mental shortcut, a heuristic left over from our evolutionary past. If it's scarce, it must be valuable. In the hands of a manipulator, this shortcut is a superhighway to compliance. Marketers wield this truth relentlessly. Offer ends at midnight. Only 2 left in stock. Last chance. These simple phrases are designed to ignite panic, bypassing your rational brain and triggering your primal survival instincts. Suddenly, you are not debating whether you need the product. You are terrified of the exclusion you will feel if you don't get it. You are not buying the item. You are buying relief from the anxiety of missing out. This mechanism is also known as reactance. When our freedom to choose is threatened, e.g., this offer will be gone forever, we react by desiring that freedom, and the item, even more. This extends far beyond sales tech. In relationships, it is the foundation of playing hard to get. By withdrawing attention and making yourself less available, you manufacture scarcity. Your perceived value skyrockets. The harder you are to reach, the more the other person craves your presence, turning their pursuit into an obsession. The devastating power of this scarcity principle is its ability to override reason. It does not matter if the thing being chased is objectively worthless. The mere belief that it is limited is enough to drive obsession. Scarcity does not whisper. It screams to the human psyche. If you don't act now, you'll lose forever. 11. The badge of command. How authority bias bypasses reason. The human brain is, by necessity, a machine of shortcuts. To navigate an infinitely complex world, we develop mental heuristics, or rules of thumb, to make decisions quickly. One of the most powerful and dangerous of these is the authority bias. This is our deep-seated, often unconscious, tendency to obey and believe those we perceive as being in positions of power. This isn't a conscious choice. It is a conditioned reflex, beaten into us from childhood. Listen to parents, teachers, and doctors. This reflex is so strong that the mere appearance of authority can be enough to make us abandon our own judgment, our logic, and even our morals. The most terrifying demonstration of this remains the Milgram experiment in the 1960s. Ordinary people were willing to administer what they believed were fatal electric shocks to a stranger, all because a man in a white lab coat, a symbol of authority, calmly insisted they must continue. The lab coat, not the man's logic, was the weapon. Manipulators understand that authority is a performance. It is signaled through symbols, and our brains are wired to react to them. These include uniforms, a doctor's white coat, a judge's robe, or a police officer's badge. They include titles: CEO, PhD, senator. They even include the trappings of wealth, an expensive suit, a luxury car, a corner office. These symbols trigger an automatic click-where response, bypassing our critical thinking. We stop analyzing the message and start obeying the messenger. Con artists and scammers, dressed as professionals, exploit this to win blind trust. Marketers use it when 9 out of 10 dentists recommend a product. A quote attributed to a famous figure carries more weight than the same quote from an unknown. The danger is that we silence our own internal voice of doubt, assuming the expert must know better. To defend against this, you must learn to separate the message from the messenger. Ask yourself, would this argument be as compelling if it came from someone in casual clothes? Does this command make sense, or am I just obeying the suit? 12. The unseen debt. Using reciprocity as a psychological leash. Reciprocity is the invisible social contract that binds humanity together. On its surface, it is a beautiful thing. The instinct to give back when something is given to us. Anthropologists argue this instinct is the very foundation of civilization, allowing our ancestors to share food, tools, and protection, knowing the favor would be returned. But in the modern world, this ancient, deeply rooted reflex has become a bug in our psychological software, one that can be ruthlessly exploited. A manipulator understands that the rule of reciprocity is a weapon. When they give you something, they are not being kind. They are creating a debt. The moment you accept their gift, no matter how small or unsolicited, a silent pressure grips your mind. You are now obligated. This tactic was famously used by the Hare Krishna movement, whose members would gift a flower to a traveler in an airport. Once the person accepted the flower, they would be asked for a donation. People hated this, but they would donate just to relieve the crushing psychological discomfort of holding the gift without repaying the debt. The manipulator knows that people dread being labeled as ungrateful or selfish. This fear is the leash. The most insidious part is that the debt is often created by an unsolicited favor. A coworker buys you a coffee you didn't ask for. A date showers you with an expensive gift on the first meeting. You feel indebted, even though you never entered into this transaction. This creates a power imbalance, allowing the manipulator to choose the time and place to cash in their favor, which is almost always far larger than the original gift. In relationships, this manifests as the person who always pays or always does the big favor, building a guilt bank they can withdraw from later. After everything I've done for you, you can't do this one thing for me. This makes compliance feel like free will, when in reality, it is coerced by the weight of an unseen obligation. 13. The yes ladder. How foot in the door escalates compliance. The foot in the door technique is a psychological trap that turns small, trivial agreements into massive, life-altering compliance. It works by exploiting one of the most powerful drivers of human behavior, the need to be, and to appear, consistent with our past actions. Once we say yes to a minor request, we feel an unconscious pressure to remain consistent with that decision, making it exponentially more likely we will say yes to a bigger demand later. This isn't just asking nicely. It's a yes ladder, and each step is designed to pull you deeper. The classic 1966 study by Friedman and Fraser demonstrated this perfectly. Researchers, posing as volunteers, asked homeowners for a tiny request: to display a small 3-inch "Be a Safe Driver" sign in their window. Most agreed. Weeks later, the researchers returned with an absurdly large request: to install a huge, ugly Drive Carefully billboard on their front lawn. A shocking 76% of the people who had accepted the first small sign also agreed to the massive billboard. By comparison, a control group that was only asked for the big billboard refused almost 90% of the time. What happened? The first small yes had subtly, but powerfully, changed their self-image. They were no longer just homeowners. They were now civic-minded, responsible citizens who believe in safe driving. To refuse the second request would be to betray this new identity, creating a painful cognitive dissonance. Manipulators and cult leaders are masters of this. It starts with a free, harmless petition, then a small donation, then a weekend retreat. Each yes makes the next one easier. Salespeople use it. Just a minute of your time becomes a 30-minute pitch. A free trial hooks you, and now canceling feels like giving up on a commitment you already made. The victim convinces themselves every step of the way, never realizing their own need for consistency is the weapon being used against them. 14. The power of Nombo. How door-in-the-face manufactures a yes. The door-in-the-face technique is the mirror opposite of its cousin, the foot in the door, and it is a brilliant, counterintuitive weapon of influence. It flips rejection, a perceived failure, into the very tool of compliance. The manipulator starts by overwhelming you with a request so extreme, so outrageous, that refusal is virtually guaranteed. This is the door in the face, but the rejection is not the end. It is the setup. Immediately after you refuse, they retreat to a much smaller, more reasonable demand. This smaller request is, of course, their true goal. And in this new context, you are far more likely to agree. This tactic works because it triggers 3 powerful psychological levers at once. First, it triggers the reciprocal concessions rule. By retreating from their extreme request to a smaller one, the manipulator appears to have made a compromise. You feel an unconscious, reciprocal pressure to also make a concession, which means moving from your no to a yes. Second, it weaponizes the contrast principle. A request for $50 might have seemed significant on its own, but when compared to the initial, absurd request for $50 suddenly feels trivial and almost generous. Your perception of value has been distorted. Third, and perhaps most powerfully, it preys on your social image. We hate appearing selfish, rigid, or uncooperative. After delivering a hard no to the first request, we feel a pang of guilt. The second, smaller request gives us an immediate, easy way to relieve that guilt and restore our self-image as a fair and reasonable person. The classic study on this, by Cialdini, asked students for an extreme request to volunteer for 2 hours a week for 2 years. All refused. When retreated to the real request, a single 2-hour trip, 50% agreed. When a control group was only asked for the real request, just 17% agreed. The initial no tripled the compliance. This is how no becomes the pathway to yes. 15. The power of the unsaid. Wielding strategic ambiguity as a weapon. Strategic ambiguity is the deliberate avoidance of clarity. It is the art of speaking in riddles, half-truths, and vague statements that allow for, and even invite, multiple interpretations. It is a psychological weapon that thrives on the human brain's most profound weakness. We are meaning-making machines, and we abhor a vacuum. Humans crave certainty, clarity, and resolution. An unknown, an unanswered question, or a vague intention creates a state of cognitive discomfort. We cannot let it rest. Strategic ambiguity weaponizes this instinct by creating a vacuum of meaning. The manipulator says something that feels significant, but is factually hollow. The listener, desperate to resolve the ambiguity, rushes to fill the void with their own assumptions, fears, hopes, or insecurities. The manipulator, by saying nothing concrete, forces everyone else to reveal their own psychological hand. In leadership, this is a tool of power and plausible deniability. A CEO who says, "We are exploring all options to optimize our structure," has created ambiguity. Insecure employees hear, "Layoffs are coming." Ambitious employees hear, "Promotions are on the table." The CEO has said neither, but has influenced both. If layoffs do happen, they can claim they warned people. If not, they can deny ever suggesting it. This is the "that's not what I meant" escape hatch. In relationships, it is the tool of breadcrumbing. A vague compliment, an unclear commitment, or a cryptic message, "You're just different," keeps the other person hooked. They are left constantly analyzing, chasing a clarity the manipulator has no intention of providing. This uncertainty becomes addictive, leaving the victim vulnerable and perpetually off balance. The manipulator remains untouchable, hidden in the shadows of the vagueness they created. 16. The magician's trick, controlling the narrative through redirection. Redirection is the art of psychological misdirection. It is a weapon of stealth, not confrontation. It seizes on a fundamental weakness of the human mind. Our attentional spotlight is narrow and easily distracted. We are wired to chase what feels new, urgent, or emotionally charged. A skilled manipulator doesn't fight your argument head-on. They simply pull your attention away from it, guiding your focus down a different path so subtly that you never realize you've been led. The most common and recognizable form of this is whataboutism. You confront someone with a failure. You didn't meet the deadline. Instead of addressing the accusation, they redirect. "Well, what about the fact that the marketing team went over budget?" Suddenly, the conversation has pivoted. The original uncomfortable topic is left unresolved, and you are now forced to defend a new position on a new battlefield. This is precisely what a magician does. They use a grand, flourishing gesture with their right hand to draw your gaze, precisely so you do not see the trick being performed by their left. In public relations, a corporation facing a scandal will suddenly launch a massive, new and exciting charitable initiative. The media, chasing the new positive story, is redirected from the original negative one. A more insidious version is emotional redirection. You confront a partner about their hurtful behavior. They don't deny it. Instead, they pivot to a new, more powerful emotion. "I can't believe you'd bring this up now, after the terrible day I've had. I'm so stressed I feel like I'm falling apart." The frame has shifted. You are no longer the victim. You are now the attacker. You are forced onto the defensive, comforting the very person who hurt you. You don't need to win an argument if you can successfully change the subject. Once you control where their gaze lands, you control the story they believe. 17. The herd imperative, why we follow the crowd, and how manipulators exploit it. Social proof is the psychological phenomenon of assuming that the actions of others reflect the correct, safe, and valuable behavior for a given situation. It is a cognitive shortcut, a heuristic, that whispers to our subconscious, if everyone is doing it, it must be the right thing. This weapon hijacks our most primal instinct, the need to belong. We are not wired for logic. We are wired for survival. And for our ancestors, survival meant following the tribe. Isolation meant death. The one who stood alone to analyze the rustling in the bushes while the rest of the tribe ran was eaten. We are the descendants of those who conformed. This ancient fear of isolation is what gives social proof its immense power. The most chilling demonstration of this is the Asch conformity experiment. In the 1950s, subjects were placed in a room with actors and asked to perform a simple visual test. The actors began, one by one, to give a clearly wrong answer. The lone subject, faced with the pressure of a unanimous, but wrong, crowd, would often panic. They would abandon the clear evidence of their own eyes, with over 75% of subjects conforming to the wrong answer at least once, just to avoid the unbearable discomfort of standing alone. Manipulators weaponize this herd imperative daily. In marketing, it's the bestseller list, the most popular tag, and the 10,000 five-star reviews. These aren't just data. They are commands. They tell your brain, don't think. Just join. Influencers flaunt millions of followers to create an illusion of authority. Fake testimonials manufacture a crowd that doesn't exist. Cult leaders pack their rallies with loyal followers to create an overwhelming, ecstatic movement that sweeps newcomers up in the collective energy. Social proof bypasses reason. The crowd becomes the compass, even when it's wrong. 18. The weight of NOMO. How guilt tripping turns empathy into a cage. Guilt tripping is a potent and insidious form of emotional blackmail that turns a person's noblest qualities, their empathy, their conscience, and their desire to be good, into a leash. It is the act of making someone feel responsible for your pain, your disappointment, or your unhappiness, thereby forcing them to act not out of their own free will, but out of a crushing sense of emotional obligation. A manipulator frames their request in a way that makes saying no feel like a moral failure. You are not just declining a request, you are letting them down, being selfish, or proving you don't care. The manipulator skillfully positions themselves as the victim, and you, the person setting a healthy boundary, as the perpetrator. This tactic rarely involves open aggression. It thrives in subtlety. The disappointed sigh, the pained look, or the martyr comment, "It's fine, I'll just do it myself, I guess." It also relies on historical ledgers. "After everything I have done for you, this is how you treat me." This language is designed to infect your mind with shame, to spark the thought that you have failed someone, even when you have done nothing wrong. This creates a moral paradox, a no-win scenario. If you resist the guilt trip and hold your boundary, you are framed as cruel or ungrateful. If you comply just to make the guilt stop, you are controlled. Over time, this erodes your self-confidence and your ability to set boundaries. You begin to question your own worth, constantly trying to prove you are enough to the very person weaponizing your conscience. To defend against this, you must draw a hard line between their feelings and your responsibilities. You can acknowledge their feeling, "I understand you are disappointed," without accepting responsibility for it, but my answer is still no. You are responsible for your actions, not for their emotional reaction to your boundaries. 19. The art of the void, wielding strategic pauses for control. In a world that rushes to fill every second with noise, the strategic pause is a weapon of profound power. This is not simply being quiet. It is the deliberate and performative withholding of words to command attention and bend the flow of interaction. Most people are terrified of silence. Conversational void feels awkward, and they will scramble to fill it with anything, often with nervous chatter or concessions. The strategic pause flips this instinct. It turns the void into a tool of pressure, making others lean in, anticipate, and often crumble under the weight of what has not been said. The pause itself becomes a high-status signal, carrying tension and authority. When used in conversation, a pause before answering a question makes your words land with immense value. It non-verbally communicates, "I am not reacting to you. I am considering your words, and now I will deliver my thoughtful response." The listener interprets this delay as wisdom and confidence. In negotiations, the strategic pause is lethal. After your opponent makes an offer, you simply remain silent. You don't nod. You don't frown. You just wait. The silence stretches. The pressure becomes unbearable. Their mind begins to race. Did I go too low? Did I offend them? They hate it, more often than not. They will break their own position, scrambling to justify their offer or even sweeten it, all because your silence made them insecure. In arguments, this tactic can shatter an opponent's momentum. When someone expects a heated, emotional reaction, and you instead give them a calm, deliberate pause, you interrupt their attack. Their anger, expecting to meet your anger, finds nothing. They are left alone with their own emotions, forced to wrestle with what they just said, and they often feel overexposed and foolish. The pause magnifies the impact of the words that follow it, turning silence into the loudest, most powerful sound in the room. 20. The narrative trap. How storytelling bypasses logic and hijacks emotion. Humans are not rational creatures. We are narrative creatures. For millennia, long before logic or science, we have been ruled by stories. We have been ruled by stories. Stories are the operating system of the human mind. They shape our beliefs, create our heroes, define our morals, and bind us together. Raw facts and data are cold, hard to remember, and easy to resist. But a story, a piece of data wrapped in emotion, is a weapon. The brain craves narrative more than logic, and a single well-told story can move hearts, shift opinions, and command obedience in ways raw facts never could. The true power of a story is that it acts as a Trojan horse for a message. It bypasses the critical, analytical mind. When you present someone with a logical argument, their counter-argument defenses come up. But when you tell them a story, their defenses drop. They are not analyzing. They are imagining. Their emotions engage. Their senses fire, and they begin to feel the reality you are constructing. The story infects them. Marketers know this well. They don't sell a product. They sell a story. Nike doesn't sell shoes. It sells a story of overcoming the odds. A skilled manipulator uses this to control. They don't say you should be suspicious of others. They tell a story of betrayal to sow paranoia. They don't say, you owe me. They tell a story of loss to stir your guilt. You don't need to prove your point if you can wrap it in a narrative strong enough to eclipse doubt. The danger of storytelling influence is its invisibility. People rarely realize they are being persuaded because they are too busy feeling. They have dropped their guard and allowed themselves to be carried away by the current of a story. And once their emotions are seized, their choices soon follow. 21. The consistency prison. How we become slaves to our own yes. The consistency principle is a psychological weapon that turns our most valued personal trait, reliability, against us. Humans have a deep, obsessive need to be, and to appear, consistent with our past words, beliefs, and actions. This drive is so powerful that it can trap us into behaviors we would never have accepted if asked outright. The principle's power is rooted in cognitive dissonance, the profound psychological discomfort we feel when our actions contradict our beliefs or past commitments. We would rather do the wrong thing consistently than admit we were inconsistent. A manipulator doesn't need to force you. They only need to get you to make a small, initial commitment. This is the foot in the door in action. That first yes, no matter how trivial, acts as a hook. It subtly, but powerfully, reshapes your self-image. Now, your identity is intertwined with that commitment. To break it later would feel like weakness, hypocrisy, or betrayal, not just to others, but to yourself. This is why salespeople try to get you to agree to tiny, meaningless statements. You'd like to save money, wouldn't you? Yes. You want the best for your family, right? Yes. Each yes is a link in a chain, making it harder to say no later without feeling like you are contradicting your own values. This mechanism is the silent force behind brand loyalty and political tribalism. Once we buy into a brand, an idea, or a political party, we feel an unconscious pressure to defend it, even in the face of new evidence that we were wrong. To change our mind is to admit our previous self was wrong, which is psychologically painful. This creates a filter bubble where we seek out information that confirms our past choice, confirmation bias, and actively ignore information that challenges it. The manipulator knows this, and once you are on their team, they can escalate their demands, knowing your own need for consistency will force you to comply, all while you remain shackled by the desperate need to be the person you claim to be. 22. The Primal Panic, weaponizing the fear appeal to bypass logic. The fear appeal is a psychological weapon that bypasses the rational, modern brain and seizes control of the oldest, most primal part, the survival instinct. It is the art of planting a seed of fear so vividly in someone's mind that all logic is silenced, critical thinking collapses, and the victim will do anything to escape the anxiety. When fear takes hold, the amygdala, the brain's threat detection center, hijacks the prefrontal cortex, the seat of reason. Decisions are no longer made from a place of clarity, but from a place of desperation. This is why fear is the most potent tool of control. The formula is brutally simple. First, you manufacture or exaggerate a threat, and then you offer your product, your ideology, or your leadership as the one and only solution to that threat. Public health campaigns use this, sometimes for good. Graphic images of diseased lungs on cigarette packs are meant to scare you into quitting. But in the hands of a manipulator, this tactic is insidious. Political propaganda is built on this. A leader doesn't say, "Here is my 10-point plan." They say, "The enemy is at the gates. They are a threat to your very way of life, and only I can protect you." Fear of the other is the most powerful political motivator in history. Marketers wield it relentlessly. Without this security system, your family is at risk. Without this insurance, you will face financial ruin. The fear narrows your vision, shutting out all other possibilities until the manipulator's solution feels like the only path to safety. The true, insidious genius of the fear appeal is that the manipulator becomes both the bringer of fear and the provider of safety. This duality creates a powerful, toxic bond. The victim doesn't see the manipulator as the source of their anxiety. They see them as their savior from it. It doesn't just make people afraid. It makes them desperately, gratefully dependent on the very hand that frightened them. 23. The Trap of Defiance. How reverse psychology manufactures compliance. Reverse psychology is a weapon that turns a person's own resistance into the tool of their compliance. It is a masterful manipulation that makes people believe they are acting out of pure defiance, when in reality, they are walking the exact path the manipulator designed for them. The tactic works by exploiting a core human instinct known as reactance. People, especially strong-willed ones, have a visceral hatred of being controlled. When we feel our freedom of choice is being threatened, our instinct is to rebel and choose the opposite, simply to reassert our autonomy. Reverse psychology doesn't fight this instinct, it weaponizes it. Instead of pushing you in the direction they want you to go, the manipulator pushes you in the opposite direction. Your rebellious streak is awakened, and in your defiant attempt to prove them wrong, you land exactly where they wanted you all along. This is used constantly in parenting. Don't you dare eat your vegetables. You probably wouldn't like them anyway. Suddenly, the child sees the vegetables not as a command, but as a challenge to their autonomy, and they eat them out of spite. In marketing, it's the slogan for a high-end product. This is not for everyone. This doesn't repel customers, it attracts them. It frames the purchase as an act of joining an exclusive club, and people rush to prove they are the kind of person who gets it. In relationships and seduction, this tactic is just as potent. When one person appears disinterested or too busy, they trigger the other person's reactance. The target now feels compelled to win their attention, chasing them harder than if they had been accommodated. The brilliance of this manipulation is that the target experiences the decision as their own. They feel a sense of victory, a thrill of having outsmarted the situation, never realizing their choice was engineered from the beginning. They march willingly into the trap, convinced they are free. 24. The power of 3. Using triangulation to divide and conquer. Triangulation is a psychological weapon of divide and conquer, pulling a third party into a two-person dynamic to create tension, insecurity, and competition. It is a sophisticated and highly destructive manipulation designed to destabilize the target, erode their self-worth, and solidify the manipulator's position of absolute control. This is the puppet master's favorite tool. In a healthy relationship, communication is direct. In a triangulated one, communication is deflected. The manipulator never has to be the bad guy. Instead of addressing a conflict directly, they introduce a rival, real or imagined. This isn't just a simple love triangle. It's a structural tool for control. In toxic relationships, this is the invisible dagger. A partner will subtly, or even overtly, praise someone else in a way that highlights your perceived flaws. My ex always understood how to handle finances. Or you should see how coworkers name dresses. They really know how to look professional. This immediately shifts the dynamic. You are no longer just in a relationship. You are in a competition. You are now forced to fight for attention and validation, constantly proving your worth against this third party, who becomes the tool that chains you to the manipulator. This is just as lethal in the workplace. A toxic boss will pit team members against each other. They will hold one person up as the golden child while subtly criticizing another, creating a scapegoat. This rivalry, where there should be unity, forces everyone to scramble for the boss's favor, strengthening the boss's position as the one. Everyone must please. The brilliance of triangulation is that the manipulator never attacks directly. They simply seed the comparison, plant the doubt, or whisper the different versions of the truth, then step back and watch as the victims fight each other, all while unknowingly feeding the power of the one who set the trap. 25. The Unspoken Deal. The danger of covert contracts. Covert contracts are one of the most toxic and pervasive forms of psychological manipulation because they are invisible, unspoken, and operate entirely in the shadows. A covert contract is an unspoken agreement created entirely in one person's mind, where they place expectations on another person without ever communicating those expectations. The danger lies in the trap. The manipulator believes they have earned something: love, loyalty, sex, repayment, or recognition, simply by performing their side of a deal the other person never even knew existed. This tactic is the signature of the nice guy or nice girl syndrome. Their internal monologue sounds like this: if I am nice to them, buy them things, and listen to all their problems, they must give me the affection I deserve. But the exchange is never spoken aloud. It is a secret, hidden bargain. The manipulator gives, helps, and sacrifices. But it is not a gift. It is a transaction. With every selfless act, their resentment builds when the unspoken contract isn't fulfilled. The victim, blind to these hidden terms, is suddenly and confusingly accused of betrayal, selfishness, or disloyalty. They are made to feel guilty for breaking a promise they never, ever made. This poisons intimacy and breeds bitterness. The person who showers their partner with favors, secretly expecting sex in return, is not a giver. They are a bargainer. The employee who works late nights without being asked, assuming their sacrifice guarantees a promotion, is not a team player. They are a victim of their own uncommunicated contract. When the raise doesn't come, they lash out at an employer who never agreed to those terms. Covert contracts thrive on dishonesty. The manipulator gets to wear the mask of generosity and self-sacrifice, all while secretly keeping a detailed, bitter ledger, demanding repayment for debts that were never acknowledged. And when they finally cash in that debt, the victim is left stunned, cornered, and blamed. 26. The Sting of Invisibility. The weapon of selective ignorance. Selective ignorance is a psychological weapon that cloaks itself in indifference, but wields the power of social execution. It is the deliberate, calculated act of ignoring a specific person, comment, or situation, not because you didn't notice, but because you want them to feel the profound sting of being dismissed. This is not the same as the silent treatment, which is a total withdrawal of all communication. Selective ignorance is more surgical, more precise. It's about continuing to interact, but erasing the other person's most important contribution, or in some cases, their very presence. Few things cut deeper than being rendered invisible. Humans are wired for recognition. A simple nod, a reply, or even a glance affirms our existence in a social space. Selective ignorance weaponizes this need by strategically withholding that affirmation. In a group conversation, the manipulator will listen to everyone but the target, or even ask a question that the target just answered, as if they never spoke. The message is clear. You do not matter. Your words have no weight. This destabilizes the target's confidence, forcing them to question their own relevance and worth. In an argument, this tactic is devastating. An aggressor makes an accusation or an insult, and the manipulator simply ignores it, continuing on with a different point. This leaves the aggressor swinging into empty air. Their attack, receiving no validation or reaction, bounces back on them, making them look foolish and small. In relationships, ignoring a partner's emotional bid, their attempt to connect, creates an aching void. The partner, feeling invisible, scrambles to fill it, often over-explaining or apologizing, just to win back the attention that was strategically withdrawn. The brilliance of selective ignorance is that it shifts power without a single word of aggression. You place yourself above the noise, making the other person feel like they are chasing shadows. 27. New Bane, the either or trap. How the forced choice technique masks control. The forced choice technique is a psychological weapon that manipulates freedom itself, giving the illusion of choice while having already eliminated the real choice. The choice of no. It works by presenting two or more options, all of which are poison, carefully designed so that whichever path the target selects, the outcome still benefits the manipulator. The brilliance lies in its exploitation of our need for autonomy. People instinctively resist a direct command. If you say, "Do this now," our defenses go up. But when you ask, "Would you like to do this now or in 10 minutes?" the dynamic shifts completely. The mind, instead of resisting the command, relaxes into the comfort of selection. The target feels empowered because they are choosing, yet the choice is nothing more than a cage disguised as liberty. This is often the first power move a parent learns. Do you want to wear the red shirt or the blue shirt? The child feels independent, not realizing that not getting dressed was never an option. They have been steered into compliance. This tactic is devastating in sales and negotiations. The classic closer question is never, "Do you want to buy this?" It is, "Would you like to pay for that with cash or credit?" This assumes the sale, bypassing the yes-no decision entirely and moving straight to the mechanics of the yes. This trap is that you've already eliminated the option of refusal. A manager asking an employee, "Do you want to take the lead on the Johnson project or the new marketing push?" has already ensured the employee is taking on more work. The victim feels ownership of the decision, making them more committed to it and less likely to question it later. They will defend the very trap they walked into because they believe, right up until the end, that it was their choice all along. 28. The vague hook. How vague compliments create addiction. Vague compliments are a psychological weapon disguised as flattery. Unlike specific praise, which is clear and finite, a vague compliment is powerful precisely because of its ambiguity. It is a hook, a psychological breadcrumb, designed to slip past a person's defenses and force them to do the work of attaching meaning. A statement like, "You have such an interesting energy," or "There's just something special about you," feels personal, yet it reveals nothing concrete. The vagueness leaves the mind restless. The recipient is forced to ask, what did they mean by that? What is this something special? What energy? In this search for meaning, the compliment grows larger and more significant than it ever was. This weapon works by bypassing logic. A specific compliment can be argued against. If someone says, "You're so intelligent," your mind might question it. Am I really? What proof do they have? But when a compliment is vague, it cannot be disproven because it isn't defined. Instead, the receiver fills in the blanks with their own desires. If they want to be seen as powerful, they will interpret energy as power. If they want to be seen as kind, they will believe the compliment referred to kindness. The flattery becomes a mirror, and the person doesn't just hear praise. They hear the exact praise they've always wanted to hear. This makes them feel uniquely, profoundly understood, even though nothing specific was ever said. Politicians, seducers, and cult leaders wield this with surgical precision. They wrap their words in mystery, forcing their followers to become addicted to the act of deciphering them. The most dangerous part is how these compliments linger. Hours or days later, the recipient is still replaying the words, assigning them deeper meaning, and becoming tethered to the one who delivered the hook. 29. The push-pull. Using psychological distancing to create obsession. Psychological distancing is a weapon that creates power not through closeness, but through the deliberate creation of a void. It is the art of pulling back emotionally, mentally, or socially, leaving others grasping for the connection you've strategically withheld. Humans are creatures of connection. We crave it, and we are profoundly unsettled by its absence. When connection is suddenly and inexplicably withdrawn, that absence screams louder than any presence ever could. This is the core mechanism of intermittent reinforcement, one of the most powerful forms of conditioning. When a reward, attention, affection is given inconsistently, it creates an obsessive, addictive chase behavior. The victim spirals into doubt. What did I do wrong? Why are they pulling away? How do I get them back? This anxiety drives them to overcompensate. They text more, try harder, and give more, desperate to regain the intimacy you've deliberately withdrawn. The cruel paradox is that the more they chase, the more powerful your distance becomes. You are training them, like a scientist in a lab, that they must work for your approval. In conflict, distancing is a far sharper weapon than anger. Instead of engaging in an argument, you retreat into cold silence, becoming less available and slower to reply. Your absence becomes a punishment. Your lack of reaction becomes a mirror, forcing the other person to confront their own guilt or powerlessness. Unlike rage, which can be matched, distance cannot be fought. It leaves the opponent swinging at air, helpless against the void. In professional settings, this elevates authority. The leader who is rarely accessible, who keeps themselves slightly out of reach, is perceived as more important. Scarcity inflates value. Psychological distance manufactures scarcity out of thin air. This weapon thrives on one simple, brutal principle. People don't value what's always available. They chase what they feel slipping away. 30. The Fabricated Clock. How false urgency hijacks the mind. False urgency is a psychological weapon that hijacks the mind by fabricating pressure, forcing people to act before they have the chance to think. It creates the illusion that time is running out, that hesitation equals loss, and that immediate action is the only way to avoid regret. When a human brain is put under this kind of time pressure, the rational mind, the prefrontal cortex, is sidelined, and the primal emotional mind, the amygdala, takes over. You are no longer thinking, "Do I want this?" You are panicking. "Am I going to lose this?" This is a deliberate pattern interrupt designed to short-circuit logic. Marketers wield this weapon mercilessly. It is the limited-time offer, the flash sale, the only 24 hours left. It is the countdown timer ticking down on the web page. It is the travel site screaming, "Only 2 rooms left at this price." These tactics are designed to bypass your rational evaluation of value and dig straight into your primal fear of missing out, FOMO. Even if the deal resets tomorrow, even if the scarcity was manufactured, the urgency feels real in the moment. You buy not because you wanted the product, but because you wanted to relieve the anxiety of the ticking clock. This extends far beyond business. Manipulators in relationships use it to trap others into compliance. If you don't decide now if you're serious about this, the chance is gone forever. If you walk out that door, I won't give you another shot. These are not requests. They are ultimatums. They spark panic, clouding your judgment and silencing your objections. The victim, desperate not to lose the opportunity or the relationship, agrees to terms they never would have accepted if given time to reflect. The clock may be fake, the deadline imaginary, but the pressure feels crushingly real. And that illusion is all that is needed to control the outcome. 31. The Coldest War. How the silent treatment weaponizes absence. Shutterstock. The silent treatment is not a lack of communication. It is a declaration of war. It is one of the most primitive and destructive psychological weapons, a hostile act of withdrawal so cold it cuts deeper than any angry insult. While an explosive argument at least signifies engagement, the silent treatment is a total severance. It is the deliberate withholding of attention, affection, and acknowledgement, turning a relationship's presence into an unbearable, suffocating void. This is not a timeout or a pause. It is a punishment. Neurologically, the human brain processes this kind of social rejection, this shunning, in the same region that processes physical pain. The victim doesn't just feel sad. They are in a state of genuine neurological torment. This weapon exploits our most fundamental human need, the need for connection. When someone we value suddenly acts as if we are invisible, the mind panics. It enters a state of desperate obsessive rumination. The victim replays every recent event, every word, searching for their crime. The silence gnaws at their self-worth, making them question their own reality. This is the insidious genius of the weapon. It forces the victim to gaslight themselves. They will invent a crime and confess to it, just to make the torment stop. This creates a suffocating power imbalance. The manipulator, by withdrawing, appears calm, in control, and untouchable, like a judge. The victim, left in the agonizing silence, feels small, desperate, and increasingly submissive, willing to beg just to be seen again. It is a cruel paradox. The more the victim craves communication, the more powerful the manipulator's silence becomes. It denies closure, which the mind craves. You can't fight silence. You can't reason with a void. It is the ultimate statement of control, a calculated presence of pain, delivered without a sound. 32. The Embodiment of Power. Faking it till you become it. Long before humans had language, they had posture. In the animal kingdom, power is rarely decided by a fight. It's decided by the display of power. Animals puff up their chests, spread their wings, or make themselves look large to signal dominance. And the weaker animal, making itself small, concedes. Power posing is the human version of this primal language. It is the deliberate use of expansive, dominant body language, standing tall, taking up space, planting your hands on your hips, to project strength, confidence, and authority. The human brain is hardwired to respect these signals. A person who enters a room with a wide stance and a steady open posture non-verbally announces, "I am in control," before a single word is spoken. But the true power of this weapon is that it's a two-way street. We believe that our mind controls our body, but the concept of embodied cognition proves that our body can just as easily control our mind. When you force your body into a high-power pose, your brain begins to mirror that state. This creates a powerful, self-fulfilling cycle. Your body convinces your mind fuels your behavior, and your behavior convinces everyone else. While the original 2010 research by Amy Cuddy, which claimed power poses changed hormone levels, raising testosterone and lowering cortisol, has faced a replication crisis, the psychological effect remains robust. When you act powerful, you feel more powerful. You become more assertive, more confident in your own thoughts, and more willing to take risks. In a conflict, the person who maintains a strong, still, and open posture, while the other person becomes agitated, fidgeting, pacing, or hunching, creates a devastating visual contrast: control versus chaos. The composed person looks like the chaos. Authority, which can intimidate and destabilize the aggressor. This weapon is brilliant in its simplicity. It is not just a display of dominance, it is the silent physical language of authority that you can use to hack your own brain and command a room. 33. The heads I win, tails you lose framework. Double bind tactics. The double bind is a psychological weapon that traps a person in a sophisticated paradox, an illusion of choice where every possible option leads to punishment or to the manipulator's desired outcome. This is a no-win scenario. The term was originally coined by anthropologist Gregory Bateson to describe a form of communication that he theorized could contribute to schizophrenia. In this original, darker context, a child is told by their mother, "You must love me." But the mother physically flinches or pulls away when the child tries to show affection. The child is trapped in a paradox. If I show love, I am punished by her rejection. If I don't show love, I am punished for being unloving. There is no correct choice. There is no escape. This creates a state of profound psychological distress and a fracturing of reality. In modern, everyday manipulation, the double bind often takes a lighter, but still potent, form: the forced choice. This tactic works by exploiting the human need for autonomy. People instinctively resist a direct command, "Clean your room," but they eagerly comply when offered what feels like a choice. Do you want to clean your room now or after dinner? The child feels empowered, not realizing the real choice, "I will not clean my room," has been erased from the equation. This is a frame control technique. A salesperson asks, "Would you like the premium package or the standard package?" The question assumes you are buying. Your mind is redirected from the S and if of the purchase to the which of the package. A manipulative partner asks, "Do you want to talk about what you did wrong here, or should we wait until we get home?" The trap is set. The conversation, and your guilt, is now inevitable. The double bind is devastating because it bypasses all resistance, disguising total submission as a moment of personal freedom. 34. The Labyrinth of Freedom. How the illusion of choice guarantees your compliance. The illusion of choice is the primary architecture of modern control. It is a psychological weapon that makes people believe they are in control, when in truth, every option they are given has been carefully framed to lead to the manipulator's desired outcome. It is, as the transcript says, freedom wrapped in chains, a stage play where you feel like you are writing the script, but the ending has already been decided. While the double bind is a specific interpersonal trap, the illusion of choice is the entire environment. It works by presenting a limited set of 2-3 options, which exploits a key psychological weakness. If you give people no choice, they rebel. If you give them too many, choice overload, they become paralyzed. But if you give them 2 options, they feel empowered and rational. This is the tactic in action. Do you want to go to bed now or in 10 minutes? The child feels in control, yet the outcome, going to bed, is guaranteed. This weapon is most powerful on a macro scale. Consider a casino. A casino is a physical building designed as an illusion of choice. You feel free to choose slots, poker, blackjack, or roulette. But this is a decoy. Every single choice has been mathematically designed by the house to lead to the exact same outcome. You lose. You are simply choosing your preferred method of compliance. The transcript's point on politics is just as stark. You are offered choice A or choice B. You are encouraged to fight, to debate, to pour your identity into this choice. But the illusion is that this is the only choice. The coin itself, the underlying system that benefits from your distraction, is never offered as an option. This weapon is so dangerous because it exploits human pride. We are so desperate to feel independent and self-directed that we will gratefully accept the freedom to choose our own cage, never realizing that true freedom, the option to walk away, was hidden from us from the very beginning. 35. Hijacking Tomorrow. How future pacing makes you commit today. Future pacing is a psychological weapon that hijacks the present by planting a vivid, emotionally charged vision of the future into a person's mind. It is the art of speaking not about what is, but about what will be, making a desired outcome feel so real and inevitable that the target begins to act as if it has already happened. This is a core technique of neuro-linguistic programming, NLP, and it works by exploiting a key glitch in the human brain. Our minds struggle to distinguish between a vividly imagined experience and a real one. When a manipulator guides you to picture yourself closing that deal, or driving that new car, or on that tropical vacation, your brain doesn't file it as a fantasy. It begins to release real dopamine. You feel the pleasure, the relief, the excitement of that future now. This emotional reward is then immediately associated with the decision in front of you. Now, to not make that decision, to not buy the car, creates a new, painful feeling. Loss aversion. It feels like you are losing a pleasure you already possess. This tactic bypasses logic and hooks directly into desire. Salespeople are masters of this. Love bombing in a toxic relationship is a form of future pacing. The manipulator who, on the third date, talks about our future children or the house we'll one day buy is creating a powerful, unearned sense of intimacy, locking the victim in. This weapon also leverages fear. This is negative future pacing. Imagine yourself in 5 years, still stuck in this same dead-end job, wishing you had been brave enough to take this chance. This vision of regret is often more powerful than the promise of gain. Future pacing bends time, pulling an imagined tomorrow into the present moment to hijack your emotional state, leaving you compelled to catch up to a reality that was planted in your mind. 36. Persuasion. Setting the stage for an inevitable yes. The transcript calls this persuasion, but its content describes a far more subtle and powerful weapon. Persuasion. This is the psychological art of setting the stage, a tactic that begins working long before a single argument is ever made. It's the process of shaping the battlefield of the mind so that when your request does arrive, it feels like the only logical and natural conclusion. Most people believe persuasion happens in the moment of decision. Dr. Robert Cialdini, the pioneer of this concept, proved that the most successful persuaders don't argue harder, they prime the audience first. The key is attention. Whatever a person is focused on in the moment before they hear your request, that thing gains a temporary, outsized importance. A skilled manipulator doesn't change your mind. They change what's on your mind just before they ask. For example, Cialdini found that if researchers first asked people, "Do you consider yourself a helpful person?" to which most said yes, they were vastly more likely to then agree to a time-consuming survey. They had been persuaded by being reminded of their helpful identity. The transcript's example of life insurance is perfect. A marketer doesn't start with statistics about death. They start with warm, loving images of happy families. This primes the emotion of love and protection. Now, when the insurance policy is presented, it's not a cold financial product. It's a tool to protect that wonderful feeling. A politician primes an audience with words like security and threat, getting them into a fearful, protective state before proposing a new surveillance policy. The policy is then received not as an invasion of privacy, but as a necessary solution to the primed fear. This is the brilliance of its invisibility. The victim believes their decision was independent, never realizing the argument was already won before it even began. 37. The Emperor's New Clothes. How authority signaling fakes power. Authority signaling is a psychological weapon that exploits a fundamental flaw in our mental software, the authority bias. This bias is our deep instinctual tendency to defer to and obey figures we perceive as powerful. Authority signaling, then, is not about having real power or knowledge. It is about the performance of it. It is a confidence game in the truest sense, and it's built on two components: symbols and behavior. The first component is the costume of authority. The con artist Frank Abagnale, of Catch Me If You Can fame, was a master of this. He didn't go to medical school. He just put on a white coat. He didn't go to flight school. He just wore the pilot's uniform. These symbols, uniforms, titles, an expensive suit, a judge's robe, trigger an automatic click-whir response of submission in our brains. We instinctively assume the symbol equals credibility. The second component is behavior. It's not just the suit, it's how you wear it. A manipulator signals authority by speaking slowly and decisively, never rushing. They avoid filler words like or like. They hold steady, unwavering eye contact. These nonverbal cues project an aura of absolute control. This makes everyone else in the room feel less certain in comparison. They begin to second-guess themselves, afraid to challenge the expert in the room. This performance creates a hierarchy out of thin air. People obey not because of proof, but because of the illusion of superiority radiating from the manipulator. Authority signaling doesn't demand respect. It hijacks our instincts and tricks our brain into giving it away. This is why people will often blindly follow, and even fiercely defend, the very figure who is controlling them. 38. The Peacock's Tail. How status display engineers your submission. Status display is a psychological weapon that wordlessly commands compliance by deliberately showcasing symbols of superiority. This tactic is designed to trigger our most primal instincts. Humans are, at our core, hierarchical animals, hardwired to notice social rank and measure ourselves against those above us. This weapon is different from authority signaling. Authority is about control, a police uniform. Status is about resources, a luxury car. This weapon works not by signaling I can punish you, but by signaling I have what you desire. The most potent displays of status are costly signals, a concept from evolutionary biology. The peacock's tail is a costly signal. It's biologically expensive and serves no survival purpose, other than to signal to mates, I have such superior genes that I can afford to waste energy on this beautiful, useless thing. A $300,000 car or a $50,000 watch is a human peacock's tail. It's an unspoken message, I am above you. This display activates psychology's strongest levers: envy, admiration, and insecurity. This creates two reactions. First, it triggers intimidation and submission. We see the superiority and feel diminished, opening us to influence. Second, it triggers the borrowed power effect. People instinctively gravitate toward high-status individuals, believing that proximity will rub off on them. This gives the high-status person a court of followers, all competing for their attention. The most advanced forms of this weapon are subtle. A person who refuses to rush signals that their time is more valuable than your time. The person who speaks last in a meeting signals that their word is the final, most confident one. It's lethal because it doesn't feel like manipulation. It feels like a natural hierarchy. But it is an engineered reality, designed to remind you of your place and their position above it. 39. The empathy hack. Weaponizing emotional mirroring for control. Emotional mirroring is a psychological weapon that bypasses all logic and strikes directly at the heart. It is the art of reflecting back another person's emotions so perfectly that they feel profoundly seen, validated, and understood, often for the first time. This is far deeper than the behavioral mirroring of copying someone's posture. This is about calibrating your own emotional output to match theirs. If they are excited, you match their enthusiasm. If they are frustrated and tense, you echo that tone and tension. This tactic weaponizes the biological basis of human connection, our mirror neuron system. Our brains are wired to feel what others feel. This is the root of empathy. A sociopath or a skilled manipulator understands this process intellectually. They can turn on the performance of empathy, mirroring the target's inner world to create a powerful but completely artificial bond. This tactic provides a hit of the most addictive drug in the world, validation. People are starved for someone to simply see their pain or joy and say, "I get it. You are not crazy for feeling this." The manipulator provides this validation strategically. The victim feels an overwhelming sense of relief and connection, believing they have found their soulmate or the one person who truly gets them. This creates a dangerous illusion of intimacy. The victim isn't connecting with the manipulator. They are connecting with a reflection of themselves. This invisible bond, forged from shared emotion, becomes a hook. The victim drops their guard, confides their deepest secrets, and becomes emotionally dependent. People don't analyze this. They feel it. And in that moment of felt connection, their emotions become the manipulators to guide, validate, and ultimately, to control. 40. The power of the void. Weaponizing information withholding. Information withholding is a psychological weapon of passive, insidious control. It thrives by exploiting one of the human mind's most powerful drivers, the Zeigarnik effect. This is the psychological principle that we remember incomplete tasks and unanswered questions far more intensely than completed ones. Our brains abhor an open loop. When a manipulator deliberately withholds information, they are not just being quiet. They are creating an unbearable vacuum of meaning in your mind. Nature abhors a vacuum, and the human psyche despises one. You ask your partner, "Where were you last night?" They respond, "I was just out." This is not an answer. It is a void. Your brain, unable to let the open loop rest, will rush to fill that void with its own content. And it will almost always fill it with the worst-case scenarios, fears, fantasies, and insecurities. The manipulator can now sit back and watch you torture yourself with your own imagination. This is why, as the transcript states, withholding can be more tormenting than a lie. A lie is a story. It's a complete narrative you can fight, challenge, or disprove. But withheld information is a ghost. It's a trap of endless speculation. This is a primary tool of control in relationships. By giving partial truths or leaving gaps, the manipulator forces you to chase clarity, making you restless, insecure, and increasingly dependent on them for the truth. In the workplace, this is the tool of the vague boss who announces, "Big changes are coming." This single, detail-free statement paralyzes the team. Employees obsess, speculate, and form anxious alliances, all while becoming more obedient, desperate to stay in favor. This weapon is brilliant in its restraint. It creates an imbalance where the one with the knowledge possesses all the power, and the one left in the dark is a prisoner. 41. The Noble Wound. How strategic vulnerability disarms and controls. Strategic vulnerability is a psychological weapon that operates as a Trojan horse, using a performance of weakness to bypass an opponent's defenses and seize control. It is a masterful, counterintuitive tactic that turns human empathy into a weapon. We are biologically wired to respond to vulnerability. Our mirror neurons fire, and our instincts urge us to protect, not attack, those who appear wounded or fragile. This tactic is not about genuine vulnerability, which is a scary, authentic sharing of self to build connection. Strategic vulnerability is a calculated performance designed to disarm and manipulate. The manipulator, often at a moment when they are about to be held accountable, will confess a flaw, a past trauma, or a deep insecurity. This noble wound is presented to the target as a sacred offering. The target's emotional state is instantly pattern interrupted. Their anger, suspicion, or righteous inquisition is neutralized, replaced by guilt, pity, and a sense of superiority. They have been moved from the role of accuser to the role of protector, and in that transition, the manipulator seizes the upper hand. In a negotiation, this might look like a competitor confessing, "Look, I'm probably in over my head here. My company is really struggling. This is a ploy to make you lower your demands out of pity, to feel like the generous winner, while they generous winner walk away with the concession they wanted all along." In a toxic relationship, this is the classic move of the abuser who, when confronted, collapses into a story of their own past abuse or inner demons. They reframe their cruelty as a symptom of their pain, forcing the victim to comfort them instead of holding them accountable. The most insidious part of this weapon is that it makes the target underestimate the manipulator. By appearing non-threatening and broken, the manipulator encourages you to drop your guard, lower your defenses, and perhaps even reveal your own vulnerabilities, which they can then silently catalog for later use. They trick you into giving your power away willingly. 42. The psychological vaccine. How inoculation theory primes your mind. Inoculation theory is a psychological weapon of preemptive defense, acting as a vaccine for the mind. First proposed by social psychologist William J. McGuire in 1961, the theory states that the best way to make a belief immune to attack is not to hide it from all criticism, but to expose it to a weakened, controlled dose of that criticism, and then teach the person how to thoroughly refute it. This process builds up psychological antibodies. When the target is later exposed to the real, full-strength version of the opposing argument, their mind has already been primed to reject it. Their resistance feels automatic and instinctual because the manipulator has already scripted their defense. This weapon is brilliant because it disguises control as critical thinking. The person doesn't feel manipulated. They feel empowered, fortified, and smarter. Cult leaders, political movements, and advertisers use this relentlessly to protect their followers from outside influence. A cult leader might say, "Your family, who doesn't understand our higher purpose, might tell you we are just trying to take your money. But as you know, that's only because they are trapped in a materialist mindset and can't see the spiritual wealth we are building." The leader has inoculated the follower. When the family does say this, the follower's brain doesn't engage with the warning. It simply activates the preloaded defense mechanism, dismissing the family member as one of the ignorant outsiders. This is also used in relationships. A manipulator might say, "Some people might tell you I'm too ambitious or intense, but that's only because they can't keep up." They have now inoculated you against the future warnings of your friends. Inoculation theory is a shield, but it is a shield forged by someone else. 43. The echo of truth. How the repetition effect makes lies believable. The repetition effect is a relentless and insidious psychological weapon that burrows into the subconscious, weaponizing familiarity to make lies feel like truth. It operates on a critical flaw in human cognition. Our brains are not built to measure truth by evidence. We are built to measure it by familiarity. The more often we hear an idea, the more fluent it becomes, meaning our brain can process it with less effort. We mistake this cognitive fluency for accuracy. This is known as the illusory truth effect. A lie told once may spark suspicion, but a lie repeated 100 times begins to feel like undeniable common sense, even if it is entirely false. This weapon is the engine of all modern propaganda and advertising. Advertisers repeat simple, catchy slogans until they echo in your mind, becoming an automatic, unthinking association. Politicians and state media repeat a single, simple phrase: "The enemy of the people, strength and stability, fake news," until the crowd chants it back like gospel. The repetition itself becomes the proof. The familiarity breeds a sense of comfort and certainty. In toxic relationships, this is a core component of gaslighting. A manipulator will repeat subtle, corrosive suggestions. You're always too emotional. You can't remember things correctly. You're lucky to have me. At first, the victim resists. But the relentless, daily repetition acts like water dripping on a stone. It wears down all doubt. The victim's reality begins to warp, and they start to accept these suggestions as their own thoughts. The brilliance of this weapon lies in its invisibility. People rarely notice the manipulation because it disguises itself as a familiar, comfortable thought. We believe the idea is something we've always known, when in reality, it was meticulously planted and reinforced by design, shaping our beliefs without ever asking our permission. 44. The imaginary audience. Weaponizing the spotlight effect. The spotlight effect is the profound, persistent, and universally mistaken belief that we are the center of everyone's attention. We walk through life as if a bright spotlight follows us, highlighting our every move, flaw, and mistake for a critical, judging audience. In reality, people are not paying nearly as much attention to us as we think. They are far too busy worrying about the imaginary spotlight on themselves. A manipulator weaponizes this false belief, amplifying their target's inner paranoia until they become paralyzed by self-consciousness and easy to control. This phenomenon was famously studied by psychologist Thomas Gilovich, who had students wear an embarrassing t-shirt into a classroom. The students predicted that at least 50% of the people in the room would notice and judge them. The reality? Only about 20% even saw it. When a manipulator triggers this effect, even a minor mistake feels catastrophic. You slip on a word, you wear a mismatched sock, or you have a nervous gesture. In your mind, the entire world has stopped to notice, judge, and mock you. The manipulator then acts as the voice of this imaginary audience. They will use subtle, shaming phrases like, "Wow, everyone saw that," or "People are probably wondering why you did that." This is a form of gaslighting. They are validating an irrational fear, making your imagined embarrassment feel real and concrete. Under this perceived weight of judgment, your confidence collapses. This tactic hijacks our primal fear of social rejection. We are wired to avoid being shamed or cast out by the tribe. When a manipulator makes you feel the spotlight is on, you become desperately cautious. You police your every move, not to achieve a goal, but to avoid this imagined shame. The victim does all the work, spiraling into self-doubt, while the manipulator just holds the imaginary spotlight. 45. The shadow of association. How guilt by association destroys trust. Guilt by association is a psychological weapon that destroys reputations and poisons trust without needing a single shred of evidence. It is a potent association fallacy that exploits a lazy but powerful mental shortcut. Our tendency to connect dots and assume that if it's near a bad thing, it is a bad thing. A manipulator ties their target to a person, an idea, or a group that already has a negative image, and then steps back to let the stain bleed over. This tactic thrives on our ancient tribal wiring. For our ancestors, survival depended on choosing the right allies and avoiding the wrong ones. Being linked to the wrong tribe, the weak, the treacherous, or the enemy, was a death sentence. That instinct still lives in us, making us recoil from anyone tied, even loosely, to something we disapprove of. A politician doesn't have to prove their opponent is corrupt. They just have to associate them with a disgraced figure or a controversial group. This was the core of McCarthyism in the 1950s, where you didn't have to be a communist. You just had to be seen with one to have your life destroyed. In the workplace, a rival can erode your credibility by spreading whispers about your questionable friendships or alliances outside of work. In personal relationships, a manipulator can make you look untrustworthy simply by highlighting your connection to a toxic family member or a promiscuous ex-partner. The brilliance of this weapon is that it requires no proof and is nearly impossible to defend against. How do you prove you aren't like someone else? The more you deny the link, the more suspicious you often appear. Once the seed is planted, people see what they expect to see. It doesn't attack. It contaminates, letting perception do the dirty work. 46. The psychological slot machine. The addiction of intermittent reinforcement. Intermittent reinforcement is a psychological weapon that creates addiction, binding people tighter than any chain by making rewards unpredictable. It is the slot machine of human manipulation. Instead of giving constant approval, affection, or praise, the manipulator delivers it sporadically, at random intervals. This inconsistency creates a powerful, obsessive, and compulsive addiction, far stronger than any steady consistency ever could. The victim never gets satisfied with a steady supply, so they become hooked on the hope of the next win, without ever knowing when it will come. This principle was famously discovered by B.F. Skinner. He found that pigeons who got a food pellet every time they pressed a lever would eventually slow down. But the pigeons who got a pellet at random, unpredictable intervals would press the lever obsessively, compulsively, unable to stop, driven by the hope that this time would be the one that paid off. The human brain is identical. Psychologically, the addiction comes from dopamine. The dopamine hit is not for the reward itself, but for the anticipation of the reward. Unpredictability supercharges anticipation. This is the entire business model of social media. The pull to refresh gesture is the lever, and the like or message is the intermittent reward. In toxic relationships, this is the devastating push-pull or hot and cold dynamic. Love bombing one day, the jackpot, followed by cold withdrawal the next, the silence, creates an addictive cycle. The victim, mistaking these scraps of affection for proof of love, convinces themselves that if they just try harder, they'll win back the good times. The destructive paradox of this weapon is its cruelty. The less predictable the reward, the more powerful its grip. The victim doesn't walk away. They cling tighter, forever trapped in the hope that the next reward is just around the corner. 47. Drowning in feeling. How emotional flooding shuts down the mind. Emotional flooding is a psychological weapon of shock and awe, designed to overwhelm the mind with an intensity of feeling so great that all logic, reason, and composure are swept away. It is the deliberate act of drowning someone in a tidal wave of a single, powerful emotion, whether it's explosive anger, suffocating guilt, irrational fear, or even overwhelming praise, until their rational mind can no longer function. When a person is emotionally flooded, their brain's threat response is triggered. This is the amygdala hijack, a term coined by psychologist Daniel Goleman. The amygdala, the primal emotional brain, hijacks the prefrontal cortex, the seat of rational thinking. The victim cannot analyze, they cannot reason, and they cannot resist. They can only react in a state of fight, flight, or freeze. The manipulator, as the one who controls the flood, also controls the reaction. In an argument, this is the person who uses explosive anger, yelling, slamming fists, using terrifying language, not to make a point, but to intimidate and punish. The target isn't convinced. They are cowed into submission, their brain shutting down to escape the perceived threat. It can also be a guilt flood, where a manipulator overwhelms you with a relentless list of all your past failings, drowning you in shame until you surrender. But it can also be positive. Love bombing is a form of emotional flood. The manipulator showers the target with so much praise, affection, and promises of a perfect future that the victim is swept up in a tide of euphoria, agreeing to commitments they would never make if they were in a rational state. The cruelty of this tactic is that it feels inescapable. The victim's only instinct is to find dry ground, and the manipulator is always the one who decides where that ground is. 48. The angel's disguise. How the halo effect blinds us to the truth. The halo effect is a psychological weapon that blinds us to reality, tricking us into seeing what we want to see, not what is actually there. It is one of the most common and powerful cognitive biases, where one single, positive trait, such as physical beauty, charm, or confidence, casts a halo over a person's entire character, making their flaws invisible and their weaknesses excused. The human brain is a lazy shortcut machine. It hates doing the hard work of complex analysis. So, it creates a simple rule. If this person is good at one thing, they must be good at all things. This phenomenon was first identified in 1920 by psychologist Edward Thorndike, who noticed in military officer evaluations that a soldier rated high in one quality, like physique, was automatically rated high in unrelated qualities like leadership and intelligence. Physical attraction is the most common trigger. Decades of research show we automatically and unconsciously assume attractive people are more intelligent, more trustworthy, more capable, and kinder than others, even with zero proof. A charming, well-dressed con artist can win a victim's life savings because the halo of their charisma blinds the victim to all the red flags. We want to believe them, so we ignore the evidence. This doesn't stop at appearances. A leader who is a confident, charismatic public speaker can make even shallow, nonsensical ideas sound profound. A single grand act of kindness can cast a halo so bright that it blinds people to a long history of cruelty and abuse. Manipulators exploit this relentlessly. They lead with their single dazzling quality, knowing it will create a positive glow that distorts all of their other actions. The danger is that the halo is sticky. Once cast, our brains will fight to defend the illusion, justifying and rationalizing bad behavior to avoid the painful truth. 49. The Devil's Mark. How the Horn Effect creates a scapegoat. The Horn Effect is the dark, cruel twin of the halo effect. It is a psychological weapon that distorts perception, where one single, negative trait or mistake casts a horn on a person, becoming a permanent stain that spreads across their entire identity. This cognitive bias makes others see every action, every word, and every gesture as further proof of weakness, incompetence, or guilt. Once this effect takes root, people stop seeing the individual. They see only the horn, the one flaw they have been conditioned to look for. The human brain, in its quest for shortcuts, loves to box people. The horn effect is the laziest and most destructive form of this. A colleague who is late to one important meeting can be branded as irresponsible. Now, even when they are on time, their work is scrutinized for other proof of this label. A person who makes one foolish comment in a group may be written off as unintelligent for the rest of their career. Manipulators, especially in group or work settings, exploit this by magnifying a target's single flaw. They will draw everyone's attention to that one mistake until it consumes the target's entire identity, effectively creating a scapegoat. In politics, an opponent will highlight one verbal gaffe, one rumor, or one scandal, and repeat it endlessly, knowing the horn effect will make the crowd forget years of achievement. In relationships, this is a tool of control. A manipulator will fixate on a single flaw in their partner, their messiness, their anxiety, their past, and use it as a constant source of criticism, eroding their self-worth. The horn effect is devastating because it dehumanizes. It traps the victim, and even their positive traits are twisted to fit the negative narrative. Oh, she's generous. No, she's just irresponsible with money. The victim is left defined, not by who they are, but by the one flaw others refuse to unsee. 50. The Identity Cage. How the labeling technique defines your reality. The labeling technique is a psychological weapon that reshapes a person's behavior by assigning them an identity, one they feel compelled to live up to or down to. It works by exploiting the human brain's deep, desperate need for consistency. We feel profound psychological discomfort, cognitive dissonance, when our actions contradict who we believe we are. When someone gives us a label, positive or negative, it acts like a seed, and our subconscious mind begins to bend our reality and our behavior to align with it. This is the Pygmalion effect, or self-fulfilling prophecy. In a famous 1968 study, researchers, Rosenthal and Jacobson, told teachers that certain random students were intellectual bloomers poised for success. By the end of the year, those students actually had higher IQ scores. The label had changed the teacher's unconscious behavior toward them, which in turn changed the student's reality. This weapon can be used for positive motivation. You're so responsible. But in the hands of a manipulator, this is a tool of control. A salesperson might say, "You seem like a sharp, decisive person who knows quality when they see it." This isn't a compliment, it's a frame. Now, if you hesitate or disagree with the salesperson, you are not just saying no. You are contradicting the identity of being sharp and decisive. To avoid this discomfort, you are nudged toward making the purchase. The negative form is just as powerful. A manipulative partner says, "You're just an anxious person," or "You're difficult." This label becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. The victim begins to doubt themselves, hesitate, and eventually, through the stress of the label itself, proves it true. The label becomes a psychological cage, and the victim's own mind becomes the warden, forcing them to align with the identity the manipulator chose for them. 51. The Gilded Cage. How strategic compliments engineer compliance. Strategic compliments are a psychological weapon that disguises manipulation as kindness, embedding influence within words that appear flattering, but are, in reality, carefully calculated to direct behavior. Unlike genuine praise, which is spontaneous and given to build connection, a strategic compliment is a transaction. It is a precise, targeted, and purposeful tool designed not to make someone feel good, but to make them act in a way that serves the manipulator's goals. This weapon exploits one of the deepest human hungers, the craving for recognition and validation. A well-placed compliment feeds that hunger, instantly lowering a person's cognitive defenses. When the ego is stroked, the watchman of the logical brain goes on a temporary break, making the person more open to suggestion and less likely to critically analyze the manipulator's true motives. The true mechanism, however, is twofold. First, it directly weaponizes the labeling technique. When a manipulator praises a specific trait, the recipient unconsciously feels compelled to live up to that label. A boss who says, "You're the only one on this team with the creative genius to solve this," isn't just praising, they are assigning a task. The employee, to remain consistent with the genius label, now feels obligated to take on the extra work. Second, it weaponizes the principle of reciprocity. When someone makes us feel good by admiring us, our brain registers an immediate, unconscious social debt. We instinctively want to repay the kindness. How? By being more agreeable, by trusting more freely, by granting the compliance they are subtly asking for. This is why manipulators in sales, seduction, or corporate life lace their conversations with praise. They know it breeds a powerful combination of attachment and obligation. The danger lies in its precision. Vague praise can be effective, but a single, thoughtful compliment that targets a person's specific insecurity or point of pride is far more lethal. It makes them feel uniquely seen and understood. They will chase more of that validation, bending their behavior to earn it again, never realizing they are being steered from the moment the kind word was spoken. 52. The gravity of the unknown. Manufacturing a mystery aura. The mystery aura is a psychological weapon that thrives on the human obsession with the unknown, transforming a person into a blank canvas that others find irresistibly compelling. People are not drawn to what is simple and clear. They are compelled by what they cannot fully grasp. This is a tactic of deliberate enigma, feeding on the scarcity of words, personal details, and emotional access. This creates a cognitive void, and the human brain abhors a void. This compulsion for closure, often called the Zeigarnik effect, means that an incomplete story or an unanswered question is remembered far more intensely than a finished one. The manipulator who withholds doesn't have to be deep, powerful, or brilliant. They only have to be unknowable. The target, in their desperate need to figure them out, will rush to fill the gaps with their own imagination. What they imagine is almost always more compelling than the truth. They project their own fantasies of depth, danger, or power onto that canvas, falling in love with a shadow of their own creation. This weapon is built by strategically contrasting with the oversharer, who is often perceived as low status and needy. The high-status leader, by contrast, is often the one who speaks last, speaks least, and leaves questions unanswered. This restraint doesn't make them boring. It suggests a depth and confidence that others find magnetic. In seduction, this is the entire engine of the chase. By being unpredictable, by vanishing and reappearing, by speaking in cryptic fragments, the manipulator creates an addictive tension. The target is kept in a state of restless analysis. What did they mean by that? Do they like me? This flips the power dynamic. Instead of the manipulator chasing the target's attention, the target is now chasing the manipulator's clarity. The less people know, the more they chase, and in that chase, they give away their focus, their energy, and their power. 53. The Matador's Cape. Goading compliance with reverse labeling. Reverse labeling is a psychological weapon that manipulates behavior by daring someone to defy the identity you assign to them. It is a brilliant, counterintuitive judo flip of the labeling technique. Topic 50. Instead of giving a positive label that someone wants to live up to, you assign them a negative or limiting label that you know their ego cannot accept. In their attempt to disprove you, they fall into the very action you desired all along. This weapon harnesses one of the most powerful forces in the human psyche: psychological reactance. First proposed by psychologist Jack Brame in 1966, reactance is our instinctive negative reaction to being controlled. When we feel our freedom of choice is being threatened or limited, we have an almost allergic reaction, an immediate urge to reassert our autonomy by doing the opposite of what we're being pushed to do. A reverse label is a provocation designed to trigger this exact reaction. A classic example is Tom Sawyer, who, when faced with the chore of painting a fence, reframes it as a privilege. He tells his friends that it's a special job, implying they probably couldn't do it right. Their egos, triggered by this reverse label, are now desperate to prove they are capable. They end up paying him for the privilege of doing his chore. In a negotiation, saying, "I don't think you're the type to really compromise or see the other side," can spark the exact opposite response. The other person, to prove they are not rigid, scrambles to demonstrate their flexibility, often making the first concession. This tactic is insidious because it cloaks manipulation as a challenge. The target doesn't feel compliant. They feel defiant. They experience the decision as their own victory, their own choice. They are the bull, charging at the matador's cape, never realizing their defiance is landing them exactly where the manipulator intended. 54. The Alchemist's Trick. Changing reality with word reframing. Word reframing is a psychological weapon that transforms perception by changing the language wrapped around an experience, decision, or belief. Words are not neutral. They are the frames for our reality, and they carry deep, unconscious emotional baggage. This tactic doesn't change the facts of a situation. It changes the lens through which those facts are interpreted, and in doing so, it changes the emotional response entirely. This concept is related to linguistic relativity, the Sapir-Whorf hypothesis, which posits that the language we use actively shapes our reality. Consider the difference. You failed versus you learned a lesson. The event is identical, but the first frame evokes shame, while the second evokes empowerment. This is the heart of corporate and military doublespeak. A layoff is reframed as a right-sizing. Civilian casualties are reframed as collateral damage. Torture is reframed as enhanced interrogation. These euphemisms are not just polite. They are psychological weapons designed to neutralize empathy and distance the actor from the moral consequences of the act. In relationships, this weapon becomes devastatingly personal. It is the language of abuse. A manipulator doesn't say, "I'm controlling you." They say, "I only control you because I love you so much." This insidious reframe twists control, a hostile act, into a symptom of love, a caring act. It forces the victim to reinterpret their own suffering. Jealousy is reframed as protection. Isolation is reframed as intimacy. Yelling is reframed as passion. The victim, desperate for the love frame to be true, begins to adopt the manipulator's dictionary, invalidating their own feelings in their own feelings. The process, the brilliance of word reframing lies in its subtlety. It rarely sparks resistance because nothing factual appears to have changed. Yet in the mind, everything has shifted. 55. The Chaos Leash, the addiction of controlled unpredictability. Controlled unpredictability is a psychological weapon that thrives on instability, keeping others perpetually guessing, unsettled, and hooked on the need to decode your next move. This is a direct, advanced application of intermittent reinforcement, topic 46, to a manipulator's entire personality. It is the push-pull, or hot and cold dynamic used as a chaos leash. This tactic deliberately mixes consistency with sudden, jarring shifts, creating a pattern of unpredictability that denies people the comfort of certainty. Humans are wired to crave predictability. Our brains equate routine with safety. Unpredictability, conversely, sparks stress, anxiety, and hyperfocus. This weapon weaponizes both of these states. The manipulator first creates a baseline of warmth, connection, and consistency. This is the hook. It gives the victim something to crave. Then, they intentionally shift, becoming cold, withdrawn, or angry for no discernible reason. This sudden withdrawal triggers a panic response in the victim. They obsess. What did I do wrong? How do I fix it? Their brain, now in a state of craving, is desperate for the reward of the manipulator's warmth. Then, just as unpredictably, the manipulator returns to warmth. This reward floods the victim's brain with dopamine. But it's not a pleasure dopamine. It's a relief dopamine, which is far more addictive. This cycle mirrors the mechanics of a gambling addiction. The victim isn't addicted to the manipulator. They are addicted to the cycle of relief. The uncertainty itself is the drug. The lows make the highs feel intoxicating. In leadership, this is the volatile boss who is one day accommodating and the next ruthless, keeping employees terrified, obedient, and desperate for approval. The brilliance is that it isn't real chaos. It's controlled chaos, designed to destabilize just enough to keep others on edge, while ensuring you remain the only source of stability they can cling to. 56. Inception. The art of planting suggestions. Suggestion planting is the inception of psychological warfare. It is a weapon of pure stealth, designed to slip ideas into the subconscious so they feel organic, like the listener's own thoughts. It works not by force, but by invitation, a direct command. You must do this. Triggers are natural reactants or resistance. But a planted suggestion bypasses this critical factor of the conscious mind entirely, because people will fight external pressure, but will almost never question a voice they believe is their own. The art of this lies in subtle, permissive language, perfected by hypnotherapists like Milton Erickson. Instead of an authoritarian command, "You will do this," the manipulator uses an invitational phrase. They might say, "I wonder what it would feel like if you tried." Or, "You're probably starting to realize how much this makes sense." This language doesn't demand compliance. It invites the target to imagine the scenario. This exploits the same glitch as future pacing. Once vividly imagined, the mind struggles to distinguish it from reality. The hypothetical quietly transforms into a belief. This tactic uses linguistic tools like presuppositions. A manipulator doesn't ask if you help me. They say, when you help me, you'll feel great. This presupposes the act of helping. Embedded commands are also common. I don't know if you're ready to make the change now. The conscious mind hears the denial, but the subconscious picks up the command. In manipulation, this is used to plant seeds of doubt. It's funny. Did you notice how Sarah looked at you strangely? The target will now obsess over a non-existent conflict. Or it's used to plant desire. People like you, who are that smart, usually find success quickly when they take a risk. The victim never feels coerced. They believe the idea came from within, which makes them defend it fiercely. 57. The loudest weapon, wielding persuasive silence. Persuasive silence is a psychological weapon that speaks louder and more terrifyingly than words ever could. It is a specific, offensive application of silence. Topic 1. And strategic pauses. Topic 19. This is not the silence of passivity. It is the silence of interrogation. It is the calculated, deliberate withholding of a response to force the other person to fill the void with their own fears, doubts, and, most importantly, confessions. Humans are resolution-driven creatures. A conversational void breaks the social rhythm and creates an immediate, unbearable tension. We are neurologically wired to crave resolution, and we will do anything to escape the discomfort of an open loop. The person facing the silence panics. Their mind races. Did I say something wrong? Do they disapprove? Am I failing? They rush to fill the emptiness, and in that desperate, nervous rush, they reveal everything. They over-explain, they backtrack, they offer concessions, they confess to things they weren't even accused of. In negotiations, this tactic is lethal. You state your offer, you go silent. Your opponent, stewing in the agonizing pressure, bids against themselves. They break the silence by sweetening their deal, lowering their price, or giving away more than they planned. Their own discomfort did all the work for you. In arguments, this is a tool of pure dominance. The other person is shouting, emotional and accusatory. You refuse to engage. Your stillness turns their fury inward. They feel unheard, exposed, and foolish. Their words, finding no target, lose all momentum. They stumble, and often apologize just to get a reaction from you. This tactic flips the order of communication. Power is gained not by speech, but by holding back. The person who is comfortable with the silence is the person in control. You are non-verbally communicating, I have all the time in the world. I am not pressured. You are. 58. The Unwanted Mirror. How role reversal traps the attacker. Role reversal is a psychological weapon that functions as a checkmate, flipping the entire power dynamic by forcing someone to see themselves in the very position they have placed you in. It is the art of turning the mirror around, making the accuser feel accused, the manipulator feel manipulated, and the dominant suddenly feel powerless. This tactic exploits a key psychological flaw. People are deeply uncomfortable when their own tactics are used against them. It shatters their certainty and leaves them scrambling for balance. The most common form of this is forcing cognitive empathy on someone who has none. In an argument, when someone criticizes you unfairly, you don't defend yourself against the criticism. You reverse the frame. You ask, if I said that to you, in that exact tone of voice, how would you feel? This is a logic trap. It forces them to either A. Admit it would feel bad, thus invalidating their own attack and exposing their hypocrisy, or B. Claim it wouldn't bother them, revealing themselves as cold or a liar, which also discredits them. A more advanced version is to mirror the manipulator's behavior. A partner gives you the silent treatment. Topic 31. Instead of begging for a response, you become silent. You become unreachable, unbothered, and emotionally detached. The manipulator, who is used to wielding the silence as a tool of control, cannot stand being on the receiving end of it. Their favorite weapon becomes their personal hell. This tactic has a dark side: Darvo, deny, attack, and reverse victim and offender. This is a defensive role reversal used by manipulators. When confronted, they deny the abuse, attack the victim for confronting them, and then reverse the roles, claiming they are the real victim. I can't believe you're attacking me after all I've done for you. This flips the script, putting the victim on the defensive. 59. The Empathy Faucet. Controlling others with selective empathy. Selective empathy is a psychological weapon that cloaks manipulation and compassion, offering understanding only when it serves the manipulator's influence, and withholding it to strengthen their control. Unlike genuine empathy, which flows freely, selective empathy is a calculated and transactional tool. It is the hot-cold switch for emotional validation, and it is designed to create profound dependency. This tactic is a direct application of intermittent reinforcement, topic 46, and controlled unpredictability, topic 55. But it is applied specifically to validation. Humans are wired to seek connection and understanding. The manipulator begins by love bombing the target with empathy. They mirror the target's pain, topic 39, reflect their deepest feelings, and create a powerful, addictive surge of relief and trust. The victim thinks, finally, someone who gets me. This is the hook. Then, the manipulator turns off the empathy faucet. The target, now vulnerable and open, comes to them seeking that same validation and is met with coldness. They are dismissed, told they are too sensitive, or that their feelings are irrational. This sudden withdrawal creates panic. The target, desperate to regain that addictive feeling of validation, begins working harder to earn the manipulator's care. They bend themselves to the manipulator's expectations, suppress their own needs, and apologize for things they didn't do, just to get another hit of empathy. This is the tactic of the cult leader, or toxic boss. Immense compassion for those who toe the line, but brutal coldness for those who question. It conditions the group. Approval, chi-bi warmth. Approval, ai-chi warmth. Dissent, isolation. It gives just enough warmth to keep people attached, while maintaining just enough coldness to keep them desperate, hungry, and controlled. 60. The power of the premise. How expectation setting writes the future. Expectation setting is a psychological weapon that dictates how people experience reality before reality even arrives. It is a preemptive frame for perception. Humans rarely judge events by their objective outcome. We judge them by whether those outcomes met, exceeded, or fell short of what we were led to expect. Our most powerful emotions, disappointment, relief, pride, and trust, are all born in this gap between the premise and the reality. By controlling the expectation, you control the emotional reaction. This weapon is wielded in two primary ways. The first, and most common, is setting low expectations to engineer satisfaction. This is the classic under-promise, over-deliver strategy. A consultant tells a client, "This is an incredibly complex project. It will likely take 6 weeks." They then deliver the exact same work in 4 weeks. The client is thrilled and sees them as a hero. If they had promised 4 weeks, the same result would have just been meeting expectations. By setting the bar low, an average result feels extraordinary. The second way is setting high expectations to create pressure. A leader constantly reminds the team of their exceptional standards. In this company, we are winners. We don't accept good enough. This high bar creates intense pressure for people to live up to that identity. The darkest application is normalizing a negative reality. A toxic boss frames an abusive, chaotic workplace as just the normal grind. A manipulative partner frames the bare minimum of decency as a grand gesture. This expectation recalibration makes victims grateful for scraps, never realizing they are being conditioned to accept less. 61. The Pre-emptive Loss. How negative visualization controls through fear. Negative visualization is a psychological weapon that twists a tool of ancient philosophy into an instrument of modern manipulation. While Stoic philosophers like Marcus Aurelius practiced premeditatio malorum, the premeditation of evils, to build gratitude and resilience, the manipulator weaponizes this concept to induce panic and compliance. It is the act of forcing someone to confront the vivid, detailed, and emotionally agonizing pain of losing what they value most before it is actually gone. This tactic shatters the illusion of security and the optimism bias that humans rely on to function. It replaces our default state of comfort with a sudden, raw vulnerability. The manipulator understands a key flaw in our neurochemistry. The brain struggles to distinguish between a vividly imagined loss and a real one. When you are forced to truly picture your life without your job, without your reputation, or without the person you love, your limbic system reacts as if the loss is already happening, releasing a genuine surge of panic, dread, and survival anxiety. That imagined emptiness becomes the manipulator's leverage. This weapon is ruthless in its application. In relationships, it is the core of an abusive threat. If you leave me, you'll be nothing. You will never see your children again. The goal is to make the victim feel the agony of that loss in the present moment, forcing them to cling tighter just to make the vision stop. In sales, it is the fear-based close. Imagine what would happen to your family if you didn't have this insurance when disaster strikes. You are no longer buying a product. You are buying an escape from the nightmare they just planted in your mind. In politics, it is the engine of fear campaigns, painting a vivid picture of social collapse or economic ruin if the opposition wins. The power lies in the stark contrast. By making you live the nightmare, the manipulator makes any alternative, any action, any surrender, feel like salvation. 62. The scoreboard of the self. Weaponizing social comparison. Social comparison is a psychological weapon that exploits one of the most fundamental and inescapable drivers of the human psyche. In 1954, social psychologist Leon Festinger proposed his social comparison theory, which states that humans have an innate drive to evaluate their own opinions and abilities, and because objective, non-social standards are often unavailable, we do this by comparing ourselves to other people. This endless mental scoreboard, measuring our status, appearance, wealth, and success against those around us, is how we build our identity. This drive isn't inherently bad. Upward comparison can inspire ambition, while downward comparison can create gratitude. But a manipulator weaponizes this drive. They seize control of the scoreboard and force their target into a game they can never win. A game designed to destroy confidence and manufacture insecurity. The entire advertising and social media industry is built on this. Advertisers parade images of flawless bodies, perfect lifestyles, and luxury products, not to sell a product, but to sell a feeling of inadequacy. The implicit, brutal message is, you are less until you buy this, change this, or conform to this. Social media accelerates this into a 24/7 crisis, forcing us to compare our behind-the-scenes reality with everyone else's curated highlight reel. In personal dynamics, a manipulator uses this as a tool of triangulation. They will deliberately praise someone else in your presence. Your colleague is so much more focused than you, or my ex was so much better at X. This is not a casual observation. It is a tactic. It forces you to stop focusing on the manipulator's flaws and start competing for their approval, making you strive harder to win on their terms. The danger is that the scoreboard is endless. The manipulator, as the one holding the scoreboard, keeps you chasing a finish line you can never reach. 63. The power of the partial view, creating value with controlled exposure. Controlled exposure is the weaponization of the scarcity principle, topic 10, applied not to a product, but to you. It is the deliberate, artful act of revealing fragments while concealing the whole. This tactic manipulates perception by carefully rationing your presence, your attention, and your information. It turns you into a mystery, and in the game of power, mystery is a currency. This weapon exploits a fundamental cognitive bias. We are naturally drawn to what we cannot fully have or understand. This is the Zygarnik effect, or the itch of the unknown. When something is scarce, hidden, or incomplete, its perceived value multiplies in our minds. By limiting your exposure, you trigger obsession. You create a cognitive void, and people will rush to fill in the blanks with their own imagination. Critically, their imagination will almost always paint you as more impressive, more desirable, or more intimidating than the full, mundane reality. Abundance breeds indifference. Scarcity breeds obsession. This is used everywhere. In seduction and relationships, it is the classic push-pull or hot and cold tactic. The manipulator is intensely present, love-bombing the target, and then just as suddenly, they pull back. They become less available. Their texts slow down. They disappear for a time. This controlled exposure creates longing, anxiety, and a desperate chase response from the target, who is now addicted to the high of their presence. In leadership, this creates authority. The leader who is always available, always talking, and always one of the team often loses their aura. The powerful leader uses controlled exposure. They speak less, they appear less often, and they share information sparingly. This distance doesn't make them weak. It magnifies their presence. Their words carry more weight because they are rare. The brilliance of this tactic is its efficiency. You train people to value every drop of attention you give them. You don't lose power by holding back. You gain it because people will always want more of what they feel they cannot fully reach. 64. The Pavlovian Leash. How anchored emotions control your feelings. Anchored emotions are a psychological weapon that turns fleeting feelings into powerful, controllable triggers. This is the human equivalent of Pavlov's bell. It is a core concept of neuro-linguistic programming, NLP, based on classical conditioning. The manipulator anchors, or binds, a strong emotional state, such as pleasure, fear, guilt, or desire, to a specific, subtle cue, a touch, a word, a sound, a word, a sound, or a gesture. Once this link is set, the cue can be used to summon the emotion at will, without the victim's conscious consent. Our brains are wired to build these associations. A specific song from your youth doesn't just remind you of the past, it transports you, making you feel the same emotions you felt then. The smell of a certain perfume can instantly trigger feelings of nostalgia or dread. These are natural anchors. A manipulator doesn't wait for them to form. They build them. To build a positive anchor, they wait until the target is in a peak emotional state. Laughing, feeling successful, feeling loved. And then, at the peak of that feeling, they apply the trigger. For example, every time their partner is laughing, they gently touch their shoulder in a specific way. After a few repetitions, the touch itself becomes enough to induce the feeling of laughter and warmth. To build a negative anchor, they do the reverse. Every time the target feels shame or fear, the manipulator uses a specific cold tone of voice or a particular phrase, "You're being irrational." Soon, that phrase alone is enough to trigger the feeling of shame. This is used to build obsession, linking their presence to pleasure, or to trap victims in cycles of dependency. An abuser can create a fear anchor so powerful that a single look or the sound of their keys in the door can induce submissive compliance. The true danger is invisibility. The victim believes they are responding to the current moment, but they are actually being puppeteered by a past emotion implanted by design. 65. The ticking clock trap. Manufacturing compliance with time pressure. Time pressure is a psychological weapon that hijacks rational decision-making by suffocating the target with a manufactured sense of urgency. This is a tactic that combines the scarcity principle, topic 10, and false urgency, topic 58. But it is aimed squarely at the clock. It forces choices to be made, not with clarity, but with panic. The manipulator understands a fundamental flaw in our wiring. The human brain is terrible at critical thinking under pressure. When the window of opportunity appears to be closing, our brain switches from the logical, slow prefrontal cortex, which handles analysis, to the reactive, fast survival mode of the amygdala, which handles threats. We stop analyzing and start reacting. This weapon fundamentally weaponizes fear of missing out, FOMO. It's not about the desire to gain. It's about the terror of losing. The salesman's classic "this offer expires at midnight" is a perfect example. The shopper, who was previously just browsing, is now thrust into a high-stakes decision. Their anxiety spikes. The key insight is that the victim isn't buying the product. They are buying relief from the anxiety of the ticking clock. What? They are World War. The pressure itself is the sales tool. This is devastating in negotiations. A negotiator will manufacture a deadline. Look, I have another offer on the table, and I have to give them an answer in 1 hour. It's this deal, right now, or I'm walking. This forces the other side to rush, cut corners, and make concessions they would never have made if given 24 hours to think. In relationships, this is the tool of the ultimatum. You need to decide now if you're going to marry me, or it's over. Move in with me by the end of the month, or I'm gone. This isn't a decision. It's a hostage situation. The target is forced to comply, not out of love, but out of fear of loss. The brilliance of time pressure is that it feels external. It feels like fate or circumstance. But in 99% of cases, the deadline is manufactured by the manipulator. The clock is a cage. 66. The power of the premise. Seizing control with dominance framing. Dominance framing is the art of psychological frame control. It is a psychological weapon that seizes control of an interaction by defining the narrative before anyone else has a chance to. The manipulator sets the terms, the perspective, and the language of the discussion, building a box and forcing everyone else to think and argue inside that box. This is based on the work of cognitive linguists like George Lakoff. The person who controls the frame of the debate wins the debate. Once your frame becomes the lens through which reality is viewed, all subsequent discussion bends to your authority. This weapon combines several others. It uses anchoring, topic 6, as the human brain is biased toward the first interpretation it hears. That first frame becomes the anchor against which all other ideas are measured. It also uses suggestion planting, topic 56, and false consensus, topic 83. The transcript's example is perfect. Let's be honest, everyone here knows this approach is flawed. This is a masterful frame. It presupposes two things. 1. The approach is flawed, and 2. Everyone already agrees. The opponent is now trapped. They are not just arguing their point, they are arguing against honesty and the consensus of the group. In politics, a politician in a debate doesn't answer, "Do you support this tax?" They reframe, "Are you asking if I support investing in our children's future?" They have now reframed tax, a negative, as investment, a positive. Their opponent is now forced to argue against investing in children. In relationships, this is a common defensive tactic. A partner, when confronted about their behavior, reframes the discussion. "This isn't about what I did. It's about your insecurity and trust issues." The frame has shifted. The manipulator is no longer the defendant. They are the analyst, and you are the problem. Once people accept the frame, they rarely question it. By deciding how the story begins, you silently dictate how it must end. 67. The Supplier. How weaponized flattery creates validation addicts. Flattery as a weapon is the art of disguising control as admiration. It is a more focused and predatory version of strategic compliments. Topic 51. While genuine compliments are given to build connection, weaponized flattery is calculated. It is a psychological transaction designed to disarm the target, inflate their ego, lower their defenses, and make them hungry for more of the sweet words that only the manipulator controls. The victim believes they are being valued, when in truth, they are being softened for influence. This weapon is a 1-2 punch of neurochemistry and psychology. First, the neurochemistry. Humans are wired to crave recognition. When someone tells us what we want to hear, how talented, beautiful, or intelligent we are, our brain releases dopamine, the pleasure and motivation chemical. This chemical high is addictive. The manipulator intentionally makes themselves the supplier of this drug, creating a validation addiction where the victim must return to them for their fix. Second, the psychology. The flattery is precise. A manipulator doesn't just give generic praise. They target a person's insecurities. Praising a proud person makes them glow, but praising a person for a quality they doubt in themselves, e.g., telling an insecure person they are brilliant, is even more powerful. It makes them strive harder to prove the compliment true and maintain that intoxicating image. This weapon is uniquely dangerous because it feels good. Unlike insults or intimidation, which spark resistance, flattery feels like a gift. The victim welcomes it, unaware that each kind word is a thread, weaving them into compliance. They chase the approval, overlook the red flags, and grant influence freely, all while believing they are simply being admired. Flattery doesn't just stroke the ego, it shackles it. 68. The unfinished story. Creating obsession with manufactured intrigue. Manufactured intrigue is a psychological weapon that thrives on curiosity, which the transcript aptly calls the most addictive hunger of the human mind. This is an active, offensive version of controlled exposure. Topic 63. Humans are meaning-making creatures. We cannot stand the itch of the unknown. We are neurologically wired for closure. This weapon deliberately denies that closure, creating a cognitive void or open loop that the target finds themselves obsessing over. This is a direct exploitation of the Zeigarnik effect, a psychological principle which states that the brain remembers incomplete tasks and unanswered questions far more intensely than completed ones. A manipulator doesn't just withhold information. They advertise that they are withholding it. They plant the mystery. They will drop a hint. There's something I should probably tell you. But never mind, it's nothing. Or, I know something about you that you don't even realize. The target's imagination is now hijacked. It floods the void with possibilities, and what the mind invents is almost always more powerful and anxiety-inducing than the truth. In marketing, this is the clickbait headline, one weird trick, or the movie trailer that hints at a secret but never reveals it. In business, it makes a pitch magnetic. By teasing benefits without fully revealing them, you spark desire before the full explanation. In seduction and relationships, this tactic makes you unforgettable. The person who speaks in half-truths, who hints at a dark past but never explains it, who sends a cryptic text, they are manufacturing intrigue to create an addictive tension. The target is forced into the role of detective, constantly analyzing and chasing clarity. The brilliance of this tactic is that it flips the dynamic. Instead of you chasing their attention, they are now chasing yours. What begins as simple curiosity soon becomes a draining obsession. And in that obsession, your control is quietly secured. 69. The Mental Shutdown. Weaponizing cognitive overload. Cognitive overload is a psychological weapon that attacks the bandwidth of the human mind. It is a denial-of-service attack on the brain. It works by crushing the mind under the weight of too much information, too many options, or too many demands all at once. This tactic exploits the brain's strictly limited processing power, known as our working memory. When that working memory is intentionally flooded, clarity collapses, critical thinking shuts down, and the victim is reduced to seeking the easiest possible escape. The manipulator creates a blizzard of data. They will fire rapid-fire questions, use highly technical jargon, or present massive, unreadable documents. The victim's brain scrambles to keep up, but for every one thread they grasp, 3 more slip away. This creates a state of intense decision, fatigue, and analysis paralysis. Exhaustion builds rapidly. The victim, desperate to escape the chaos and silence the storm in their head, will grasp for the simplest shortcut available. The manipulator then presents their desired option as that shortcut. In negotiations, this is a classic document dump. An unscrupulous lawyer will send their opponent a 500-page contract with a 24-hour deadline, knowing full well it's impossible to analyze. They have buried their real manipulative clauses in the noise, betting that the opponent, under cognitive overload, will miss them. In sales, this is the jargon flood. A car salesman or electronics salesperson bombards a customer with technical specs, refresh rates, and proprietary feature names. The customer's brain shuts down. They feel stupid and overwhelmed. They then defer to the expert's recommendation. So just tell me, which one is the best? Which is exactly what the salesperson wanted. In personal arguments, this is a form of emotional flooding. Topic 47. The manipulator floods you with accusations, contradictions, and past grievances, all at once. You stop defending yourself, not because you are guilty, but because your mind is too overloaded to track the argument. 70. The unspoken threat. How covert intimidation paralyzes with doubt. Covert intimidation is the ghost in the room. It is a psychological weapon that doesn't roar. It whispers. Unlike an overt threat, do this, or I'll fire you, which is obvious, provable, and easy to resist. Covert intimidation works in the shadows. It plants a seed of unease so subtle that the victim cannot logically explain why they feel threatened. It is the offhand remark, the joke with a sting, the lingering stare, or the calculated pause that sends a chill down the spine without ever crossing the line into open aggression. It leaves no proof, only a gnawing sense of danger. This weapon's power comes from 2 things: plausible deniability and exploiting the imagination. The manipulator thrives on plausible deniability. They will make a veiled threat. That's a nice reputation you have. It would be a shame if something happened to it. If confronted, they will immediately gaslight the victim. What? I was just making an observation. You're being paranoid. The victim is left feeling crazy. The manipulator forces the victim's own imagination to do the dirty work. The human brain is a threat detection machine, evolved to sense danger, not just in roars, but in subtle cues. The manipulator's quiet laugh, in response to your new idea, undermines you more than open ridicule, because your own mind fills in the blanks with, they know something I don't. They think I'm a fool. This tactic paralyzes with doubt, whereas open intimidation provokes resistance. Open threats create martyrs and unite opponents. Covert threats isolate the victim, making them second-guess their own perceptions. They are left walking on eggshells, constantly trying to avoid an unseen, unproven consequence, remaining silent and compliant. 71. The power of the void. How role ambiguity creates dependency. Role ambiguity is a psychological weapon that destabilizes others by creating a fog of war in everyday life, deliberately blurring the boundaries of responsibility, authority, and expectation. This is not a simple lack of clarity. It is the strategic cultivation of confusion. This tactic originates in organizational psychology, where studies show that ambiguous roles are a primary driver of workplace stress, low morale, and burnout. A manipulator imports this high-stress corporate flaw into their personal relationships, engineering a bureaucracy of one where they are the sole, unaccountable administrator. The weapon works by attacking our fundamental human need for structure and certainty. We are meaning-making creatures. Our brains are wired to crave cognitive closure. We must know where we stand, what the rules are, and how we will be judged. This structure gives us a sense of safety, competence, and self-efficacy. Role ambiguity denies us this. It creates an environment of profound anxiety and hesitation. When we are unsure of our role, we are afraid to act, lest we step out of line. The manipulator then positions themselves as the only source of clarity in the fog they create. In the workplace, this is the vague boss who never sends clear emails, never defines the scope of a project, and never sets clear metrics for success. This is a power move. It gives them 100% plausible deniability. If a project fails, it is your fault for misunderstanding their non-existent instructions. It also creates a fawning dependency, forcing employees to constantly check in for scraps of guidance, feeding the boss's ego. In relationships, this is the what are we manipulator who refuses to define the connection. They act like a committed partner one day and a distant stranger the next, keeping the victim in a state of perpetual anxious auditioning. The victim is afraid to ask for clarity, lest they be labeled needy and scare them off. The brilliance, needy, and scare them off of this tactic is that the manipulator remains untouchable. They can rewrite the rules at will because no rules were ever written down. They can deny responsibility when things go wrong and claim authority when it benefits them. They get all the power with none of the accountability. 72. The last chance illusion. How strategic scarcity forces your hand. Strategic scarcity is the deliberate manufacturing of scarcity to hijack value perception. It is the offensive application of the scarcity principle. Topic 10. While that principle is a general observation, we value rare things. Strategic scarcity is the tactic of making something appear rare when it is not, purely to drive irrational, impulsive behavior. This weapon exploits two primary psychological flaws. The first is our primal fear of missing out, FOMO. This tactic bypasses our modern, logical brain and seizes our ancient, survival-wired brain, which screams, if a resource is scarce, you must get it now, or you will die. This creates an immediate surge of anxiety and urgency that short-circuits all rational thought. The manipulator creates a state of panic. The second mechanism is psychological reactance. This is our instinctive, rebellious urge when we feel our freedoms are being threatened. When a manipulator says, "This opportunity won't last," or "last chance," they are threatening our freedom to choose later. We react to this threat by desiring the item and the freedom. Even more, we don't just want the product. We want to reassert our power to choose. In marketing, this is the entire business model of limited edition drops, like high-end sneakers or fashion. The product isn't valuable because of its materials. It's valuable because the company artificially restricted the supply. The only two left in stock, or the offer ends at midnight. Timers are fake countdowns designed to force a decision. In relationships, this is the entire engine of playing hard to get. A manipulator manufactures scarcity by making their attention a rare resource. They will deliberately withhold affection, be slow to text back, or be too busy. This is a tactic to make their attention feel valuable. It creates a chase dynamic, flipping the power and forcing the target to work for a prize that is being intentionally dangled, just out of reach. The manipulator trains the target to feel grateful for scraps of their time, wielding the fear of loss as the strongest leash of all tied dot. 73. The Socratic Weapon. Controlling minds with the power of questions. The power of questions is the art of weaponizing the Socratic method. It is a psychological weapon that bends conversations, thoughts, and even belief systems without ever issuing a single command. It is the ultimate tool of covert control. A direct statement, "This is a bad idea," invites resistance and argument. But a well-crafted question, "What do you think the consequences of that idea might be?" bypasses resistance entirely. It doesn't feel like control. It feels like curiosity, yet it forces the target's brain to do the manipulator's work for them. This tactic works because the human brain is a cognitive reflex machine. We are hardwired to answer questions. The moment a question is posed, our attentional spotlight is hijacked. We are forced to focus on the frame the manipulator has just built. A skilled manipulator uses different types of questions as a toolkit. They use leading questions to plant an assumption. "Don't you agree that this is the best way forward?" They use presupposition questions to bypass a decision. "What time should we start this project?" This presupposes you have agreed to the project. They use forced empathy questions as a form of role reversal. Topic 58. How would you feel if I said that to you? But the darkest form is the guilt-laden question. In relationships, "Don't you care about us?" is not a question. It is a trap. It is an accusation. You don't care, disguised as a question. The target is now forced to defend their character. "Of course I care," rather than discuss the actual issue at hand. In sales, a bad salesman tells you a product is great. A master salesman asks, "What is the one problem you wish you could solve?" They let you define the pain, then present their product as the only cure. The target believes they made the choice, never realizing their answers were limited by the frame of the question itself. The manipulator turns the listener's own mind into the leash that controls them. 74. The gotcha tactic. How contradiction planting destroys confidence. Contradiction planting is a psychological weapon that destabilizes a person's certainty by quietly slipping seeds of doubt into their own narrative. It is a subtle, intellectual form of gaslighting. Topic 7. It doesn't challenge your sanity. It challenges your consistency, memory, and intelligence. The manipulator acts as a meticulous, critical fact-checker of your life, pointing out subtle inconsistencies, highlighting tiny cracks in your logic, and suggesting conflicts that may not even exist. This tactic works by weaponizing cognitive dissonance. Humans have a deep, almost obsessive need to feel internally consistent. We must believe that our past actions and present beliefs are in alignment. When a manipulator exposes a contradiction, it creates a painful mental itch. We are forced to stop our forward momentum and scramble to resolve this dissonance. This is the moment the manipulator seizes control. The technique doesn't require open confrontation. It thrives on subtle gotcha observations. The manipulator will wait for you to make a point, and then calmly say, "That's interesting, but I'm confused. Because last week, you said the exact opposite. Which one is it?" Whether this is true or not is irrelevant. The suggestion itself does the damage. It forces you to stop arguing your point and start defending your timeline. In a relationship, this is a tool of control. You say you love me, but you also said you were tired tonight. I just can't reconcile those two things in my head. This plants a false contradiction. Love versus being tired, and frames the victim as a hypocrite, forcing them into a defensive, apologetic posture. The brilliance of this weapon is its invisibility. It doesn't look like an attack. It looks like a request for clarity. But each planted seed grows into hesitation, self-doubt, and disorientation, making you lean on the manipulator as the only source of certainty. 75. The Cult of One. How psychological isolation creates a hostage. Psychological isolation is the quintessential weapon of high-control manipulators, from cult leaders to domestic abusers. It is the deliberate, systematic process of breaking a person, not by direct attack, but by cutting them off from their lifelines, their friends, their family, their external sources of validation, and their independent perspective. This tactic creates a cult of one, an insulated reality where the victim is trapped, alone, with no one to turn to but the very person orchestrating their isolation. This weapon is built on a simple, terrifying playbook. Step 1. Identify the support network. The manipulator identifies the threats, the target's best friend, their close family, their therapist. Step 2. Reframe the network as the enemy. Using a combination of gaslighting, topic 7, and triangulation, topic 24, the manipulator begins to sow doubt. Your friend Sarah is just jealous of us. Didn't you see how she looked at you? Your mother is always trying to control you. She's the real reason you're so anxious. That therapist is just trying to take your money and break us up. Step 3. Create an US versus the world dynamic. The manipulator fosters a siege mentality, a bunker where the only safe place is with them. Step 4. Manufacture exhaustion. The manipulator punishes the victim for interacting with their network. They will start a massive draining fight every time the victim returns from seeing their family. The victim, desperate to keep the peace, begins to self-isolate. They choose to see their friends less, not realizing they are doing the manipulator's work for them. The psychological mechanism is erosion of social proof. We validate our reality by checking it with others. When there is no one else to check with, the manipulator becomes the only mirror. They become the victim's sole source of truth, reality, and sanity. The victim's world shrinks until the abuser is all that's left. They are now a hostage, a prisoner of another's design. 76. The moral trap. How compliance framing makes no feel wrong. Compliance framing is a psychological weapon that bends decisions by shaping how choices are presented, not by changing the choices themselves. This is a more aggressive version of dominance framing. Topic 66. Dorio. It's not just setting the frame. It's tying compliance to a virtue, like intelligence, morality, or safety, and tying resistance to a sin, like foolishness, selfishness, or danger. The human mind does not evaluate options objectively. It evaluates them through the frame in which they appear. This tactic weaponizes our identity and our loss aversion. We are more motivated by the fear of losing something, like our status as a good person or a smart person, than by the prospect of gaining something. The manipulator skillfully frames no as a loss of that identity. This tactic has several forms. The social proof frame. Most people in your position agree to this. This frame makes resistance feel like social suicide. You are no longer just disagreeing. You are being difficult, making a scene, or not being a team player. The rational frame. The smart thing to do would be to sign now. This frame makes resistance feel irrational, emotional, or foolish. The moral frame. This is the most common form, also known as guilt tripping. Topic 18. If you really cared about this family, you'd do this for me. This is a moral trap. Resistance is now framed as a moral failure. You are not saying no to a request. You are proving you don't care. The risk frame. Would you rather take this fair, guaranteed deal now, or risk wasting months fighting for less? This frame, common in negotiations, paints compliance as safe and resistance as reckless self-sabotage. The brilliance of this tactic is that it seduces rather than forces. It redefines the battlefield so that the target feels their decision is free will, when in reality, their perspective was engineered from the start. 77. The interrogator's disguise. Conversational threading as a weapon. Conversational threading is the core technical skill of a master manipulator, transforming ordinary dialogue into a web of influence. It is the active, weaponized component of active listening. On the surface, it is the art of picking up fragments from what someone says and skillfully weaving them into new threads, ensuring that the conversation feels rich, engaging, and deeply connected. This tactic exploits two of our deepest needs: our fear of awkward silence and our desperate craving to be understood. The manipulator, by threading, becomes the perfect conversationalist. Here is the mechanic. The target says, "I'm just so exhausted from this new project, and my boss is relentless." A normal and low rapport response would be a statement switch. "Yeah, my boss is a jerk too." This kills the thread. A manipulator's response. A thread is a question. "You mentioned exhausted. Is that from the work itself, or is it from dealing with a relentless boss?" The manipulator has given nothing, but has pulled on two threads: exhausted, relentless boss, and invited the target to go deeper. To the target, this feels amazing. It feels like they are being truly heard. But it is a one-way interrogation. The target is revealing their pains, their values, their fears, and their levers, while the manipulator, the one asking the questions, is revealing nothing. The most powerful threading technique is the loop back. The manipulator will store a small detail you mentioned an hour ago, e.g., your childhood pet, and loop back to it. "Hey, you mentioned earlier your childhood dog was named Sparky. That's a great name. Tell me more." This creates a euphoric sense of validation. They remembered. This addictive feeling of being seen breeds trust so rapidly that the victim will hand over the keys to their entire psychological world. 78. The perfect mirror. How the echo technique manufactures trust. The echo technique is a micro-tactic of psychological manipulation, and it is the secret ingredient in conversational threading. Topic 77. If threading is the strategy, asking questions to pull on threads, the echo is the tool used to build the initial rapport. It is the auditory version of behavioral mirroring. Topic 5. It's not parroting, which is clunky and obvious. It is the subtle, artful reflecting of a person's key words and emotional tone back to them. This tactic works by signaling, "I am like you. We are aligned." When someone hears their own keywords and tone echoed back, their brain's mirror neurons fire. It creates a subconscious state of bilateral trust, as if they are literally talking to a version of themselves. It bypasses the conscious, critical mind and builds a subconscious sense of safety and connection. Let's analyze the transcript's perfect example. The target says, "I just feel so overwhelmed." A bad response, a fixer response, would be, "Oh, you should try making a list." This is invalidating. A clunky parroting response would be, "So what you're saying is, you feel overwhelmed." This is robotic. The echo technique is, "Overwhelmed." Pause. Yeah, it really does sound like too much. The manipulator has done two things. 1. They echoed the key emotional word, overwhelmed. 2. They reframed the implication of that word. It really does sound like too much. The victim feels a profound sense of validation. They feel understood without having to explain themselves. And in that moment, their defenses evaporate. The brilliance of this weapon is its invisibility. The manipulator has given nothing of themselves away. They have offered no opinion, no solution, and no personal vulnerability. They have become a perfect mirror. The target, desperate to be understood, will project all their trust onto this mirror. They will confess to the mirror, revealing deeper truths and secrets, all while the manipulator remains a blank, controlling presence. 79. The imaginary crowd. How false consensus weaponizes isolation. False consensus is a psychological weapon that exploits our most primal tribal fear, the fear of isolation. It is a direct, offensive weaponization of social proof. Topic 17. It's not about showing a real crowd. It's about inventing a fake one to pressure a target into compliance. This tactic works by creating an illusion of consensus, tricking the target into believing that everyone else already agrees with a certain idea. This tactic is a direct exploitation of the Ash conformity experiment. In the 1950s, Solomon Asch demonstrated that people will disbelieve the evidence of their own eyes and agree with a clearly wrong answer, just to avoid the social pain of standing alone. The false consensus tactic invokes this immense pressure without even needing a real crowd. It is the emperor's new clothes effect. No one wants to be the foolish one who doesn't get it. This weapon has two primary forms. The first is the bandwagon used in marketing. Slogans like, "Join the millions who have already," or "This is the best-selling," are not just facts. They are commands. They frame the choice as joining the winning team versus being left behind. The second, far darker form is the group gaslight. This is used to isolate a victim. A manipulative partner, when confronted, will say, "I've talked to our friends, and everyone agrees that you're overreacting." This is a devastating move. It instantly isolates the victim, cutting them off from their own support network. The victim is now trapped, thinking, "Am I the crazy one? Am I the only one who sees this?" This self-doubt is often enough to make them drop their valid complaint and apologize. The brilliance of this tactic is that the victim rarely questions the consensus. The fear of standing alone is stronger than the need for evidence. The victim silences themselves to get back in line, and that silence, ironically, makes the lie of consensus look like the truth. 80. The battle for airtime. How interruption control establishes rank. Interruption control is a psychological weapon that asserts dominance by physically controlling the airtime of a conversation. It operates on a primal, animalistic level, understanding that conversations are not just an exchange of ideas. They are battles for attention and status. The person who can control the flow of speech, decide who gets to speak, and assign value by either listening or interrupting, is the person who establishes themselves as the high-status alpha in the room. This tactic is a direct, non-verbal assertion of hierarchy. My voice carries more weight than yours. This weapon is wielded in two opposing ways. Tactic 1. The aggressive interruption. This is the classic steamroll. The manipulator simply talks over the target, cutting them off mid-sentence. This is not just rude. It is a dominance display. It is designed to derail the target's confidence, shatter their train of thought, and force them into a submissive rhythm. A more subtle version is the surgical interruption. A well-timed scoff, a side remark, or a laugh, while the target is making a serious point. This fractures their focus and makes them feel foolish. Over time, the target is trained into submission. They begin to hesitate before speaking, or they just stop talking altogether, ceding the entire battlefield. Tactic 2. The strategic restraint. This is the inverse and far more advanced form of control. The manipulator deliberately refuses to interrupt. They let the target talk, using silence as a tool. They let them over-explain, ramble, or dig their own grave. The target, feeling the unease of the manipulator's silence, will talk more, often revealing weaknesses or overplaying their hand. The manipulator waits for the precise moment of vulnerability, when the target is out of breath or has exposed a flaw, and then they slice in, maximizing the impact of their own words. In both cases, the hierarchy is set. The interrupter is the leader. The interrupted is the follower. 81. The silent execution. How social ostracism breaks the mind. Social ostracism is a psychological weapon that attacks our most primal fundamental human need, the need to belong. For our ancient ancestors, survival was synonymous with the tribe. To be excluded, shunned, or cast out was not a social inconvenience, it was a death sentence. That ancient, visceral fear is still hardwired into our modern brains, which is why the cold shoulder, the whispered exclusion, or the empty silence of a group can break a person faster and more deeply than any direct physical confrontation ever could. When a person is ignored, dismissed, or pushed to the margins of a group, their brain processes the event not as a simple slight, but as a profound threat. Groundbreaking neurological research using fMRI scans has shown that the brain regions that activate during social rejection, specifically the dorsal anterior cingulate cortex, are the same regions that activate during physical pain. The torment of being left out is not metaphorical. It is a genuine, neurological pain response. The victim, now in a state of perceived crisis, spirals into an agonizing internal monologue, questioning their own worth. What did I do wrong? Why don't they want me? Am I not good enough? This self-doubt is the manipulator's goal. They weaponize this primal fear of exile to enforce conformity. In a workplace, a team can quietly exclude one member, forgetting to invite them to lunch, accidentally leaving them off an email chain, forcing them to overperform and sacrifice their boundaries in a desperate bid to regain approval. In a relationship, a partner will withdraw all affection and acknowledgement, making the other person feel like a ghost in their own home, willing to beg or apologize for anything just to restore the connection. The true cruelty of this weapon is its invisibility. There are no insults, no blows, no evidence, only an absence. It is a punishment that leaves no marks, yet can hollow a person out from the inside until their entire identity depends on crawling back into the very circle that cast them out. 82. The Who You Are Trap. Weaponizing identity appeal. Identity appeal is a psychological weapon that bypasses logic and strikes directly at the ego. It is the art of tying a request to a person's core identity, making them feel that compliance is a confirmation of who they are, and resistance is a betrayal of their self-image. This tactic exploits one of the most powerful human drives, the need for consistency, as outlined in the Consistency Principle, Topic 21. We are desperate to protect our self-image, and we will go to great lengths to avoid the profound psychological discomfort, cognitive dissonance, of acting in a way that contradicts the person we believe we are. A manipulator doesn't ask, "Can you do this?" They frame the request as a test of identity. A positive label trap, a form of labeling, Topic 50, sounds like this: "You're the kind of person who always helps their friends. You're so generous." This is not a compliment, it's a frame. Now when the request for help comes, the target is cornered. To say no would be a betrayal of the generous identity they just enjoyed being labeled with. An aspirational trap is even more potent. A real leader wouldn't back down from this challenge. This frames resistance as a failure of status. Advertisers use this relentlessly. They don't sell a product. They sell an identity. Apple doesn't sell computers. It sells the identity of being a creative visionary. An eco-friendly brand whispers, "You're the type of person who cares about the planet," framing the purchase as a moral act. In relationships, this is the classic, devastating guilt trip. "If you really loved me, you would do this." This is the most lethal form. The manipulator has turned a simple choice, e.g., "I don't want to go out tonight," into a referendum on the victim's love and character. The victim isn't just deciding on an action. They are being forced to prove who they are. 83. The third option lie. How the decoy effect engineers your choice. Getty Images. The decoy effect, also known as the asymmetric dominance effect, is a psychological weapon of choice architecture. It manipulates your decision-making by introducing a third, strategically inferior option, the decoy. This decoy is not meant to be chosen. It is a tool, carefully crafted for the sole purpose of making the manipulator's real target option look like a smarter or better deal in comparison. This tactic exploits a fundamental flaw in human cognition. We hate evaluating choices in a vacuum. We are comparison machines. We don't know the objective value of a $7 coffee, so we compare it to the other options available. The decoy provides a biased reference point. The classic example is the movie theater popcorn. Small popcorn is $3. Large popcorn is $7. This is a hard choice. $7 feels like a lot. So the theater introduces a medium decoy for 6 to 50 cents. Suddenly, the $7 large looks like a no-brainer. The $6.50 option is asymmetrically dominated by the large. For only 50 cents more, you get a much bigger size. The decoy's only job was to be a terrible deal to make you feel smart for choosing the large. This was famously tested by economist Dan Ariely with the Economist magazine subscriptions. The options were 1. Web only for $59, or 2. Web jewel print for $125. Most people chose the cheaper $59 option. But when a third, decoy, option was added, print only for $125, the dynamic flipped. Now, the web print looked like an amazing deal, getting the web for free. And it became the overwhelmingly popular choice. The decoy steered the decision. The brilliance of this tactic is that it masks manipulation as empowerment. The victim feels like they made a rational, independent, and logical decision, never realizing their choice was engineered from the very beginning. 84. The Tripwire Tactic. Weaponizing emotional triggers. Emotional triggers are the tripwires of the human psyche. They are the invisible, unhealed wounds, insecurities, and unresolved scars from our past. We all have. A manipulator does not cause these wounds. They discover them and then weaponize them. This tactic is about intentionally pulling a trigger with a specific word, a tone of voice, or a gesture to unleash uncontrollable emotional reaction. The goal is to hijack the target's brain, bypassing all logic. The mechanism is a flashback on a micro level. When a trigger is pulled, the rational brain, prefrontal cortex, shuts down, and the primal, emotional brain, the amygdala, takes over. This is an amygdala hijack. The victim is no longer in the present moment. They are emotionally flooded, reacting not to the current situation, but to the original pain from their past. A skilled manipulator, in the early information gathering, love bombing stage, will act like a compassionate confidant. They will encourage you to share your deepest fears, past traumas, and biggest insecurities. They are not listening to connect. They are listening to find your triggers. They are building a personalized arsenal, a how-to guide for your destruction. Once they have this map, they can deploy it at will. If your trigger is a fear of abandonment, they will use the silent treatment, topic 31, to induce panic. If your trigger is a fear of inadequacy, they will use selective memory, topic 89, to list your failures. A simple phrase like "you're just like your mother" can cause a complete emotional collapse. The victim, now hijacked by their own old pain, becomes defensive, desperate, or submissive. The manipulator, having created the emotional crisis, now positions themselves as the solution, offering comfort or forgiveness and creating a devastating trauma bond. The victim believes their reaction is authentic, never realizing they are a puppet being controlled by someone who knows exactly which strings to pull. 85. The Catch-22 command, trapping with paradoxical requests. Paradoxical requests are a psychological weapon that traps a person in a catch-22, a cognitive snare from which there is no escape. It is the art of issuing a command that is impossible to obey without contradicting itself. This tactic is a form of double bind. Topic 33. And it is designed not to get a result, but to destabilize the target's mind, short-circuiting their logic and forcing them into a state of confusion, frustration, and, ultimately, submission. This weapon works by creating a no-win scenario. The classic examples are commands that target involuntary behavior. Be spontaneous. The very act of trying to be spontaneous is by definition not spontaneous. Relax right now. The demand itself creates pressure and anxiety, making relaxation impossible. Stop trying so hard to please me. The victim is now trapped. If they stop trying, are they displeasing? If they keep trying, they are disobeying the command. This is a damned if you do, damned if you don't framework. This tactic is used to assert dominance by making the target feel inadequate. In a toxic workplace, it's the manager who says, "I want you to be more autonomous," and take initiative. But also, you must run every single decision by me first. The employee is now permanently in the wrong. In relationships, it is the parent or partner who demands a feeling. If you really loved me, you would want to do this. This is a paradox that frames love as compulsory. The victim, desperate to escape this cognitive knot and just get it right, begins to doubt their own logic and ability to succeed. Their confidence erodes. They become more submissive, more apologetic, and more dependent on the manipulator for the rules of an unwinnable game, if only to stop the torment of the contradiction. 86. The Hero to Zero Tactic. Controlling with Status Withdrawal. Status withdrawal is a psychological weapon that combines the addictive power of intermittent reinforcement, topic 46, with our primal need for social rank. It is a two-step hook and pull tactic that is far more brutal than a simple insult. An insult is an attack. Status withdrawal is an erasure. Step 1. The hook, granting status. First, the manipulator gives you status. They love bomb you with validation. In a relationship, they shower you with affection and tell you you're not like anyone else. In a workplace, a leader praises you in public, making you the golden child. They get you addicted to the dopamine hit of this elevated status. You are hooked on the feeling of being special. Step 2. The pull, the withdrawal. Then, suddenly and without warning, they strip that status away. The partner who adored you now becomes cold and forgets to acknowledge you. The leader who praised you ignores you in the meeting, giving the big project to someone else. You have instantly gone from hero to zero. This is not just disappointment. This is a primal threat. Our brains are wired for social survival. Being downgraded or cast out by the tribe is a primal fear. The absence of the praise feels like a void, a suffocating silence that gnaws at your self-worth. The victim's brain panics. They enter a state of obsessive rumination. What did I do wrong? How do I fix it? How do I get back up? They are now desperate to win back the status. They will work harder, comply faster, sacrifice their boundaries, and apologize for things they didn't do, all in a desperate bid to get another hit of the validation that was once free. The cruelty is in its silence. It requires no threats, only the absence of a reward, creating a vacuum so unbearable that the victim rushes to fill it, handing over all their power. 87. The Emotional Thermostat. Controlling rooms with emotional contagion. Emotional contagion is a psychological weapon of atmosphere. It is the, often deliberate, act of projecting a strong emotion so powerfully that it infects everyone in the room, like a wildfire. This tactic bypasses all logic, all arguments, and all facts, and instead hijacks the nervous systems of others. It works by exploiting a primitive pre-verbal human mechanism, mirror neurons. Our brains are wired to subconsciously mirror the emotional states of those around us. This is not a thought, it is a physiological reflex. When we are around a calm person, our own heart rate slows. When we are around a panicked person, our own adrenaline spikes. This is a survival instinct. If the tribe is panicking, I should panic too, before I even know why. A skilled manipulator learns to become the emotional thermostat for any room, setting the emotional temperature while everyone else is forced to adjust. To create panic urgency, the manipulator projects anxiety. They speak faster, seem stressed, and use catastrophic language. The team catches this panic and rushes to comply. To disarm calm, they project radical calm in the middle of a crisis. This pattern interrupt makes them seem in control and high status, forcing others to align with their composure. To control a partner, they project despair or anger. They flood the home with a toxic atmosphere of sighs, silent brooding, or tense movements. The victim catches this dread, and become submissive, walking on eggshells to avoid setting them off. This weapon is devastating because of its invisibility. People rarely realize their feelings are not their own. They assume the anxiety, the anger, or even the love-bombed euphoria is theirs, not borrowed from the manipulator. And once inside the victim's mind, those borrowed emotions shape their thoughts, decisions, and behaviors. 88. The certainty illusion. Weaponizing confidence projection. Confidence projection is a psychological weapon that exploits a fundamental bug in human software. We are wired to follow certainty, not truth. We instinctively equate confidence with competence. This weapon is the con man's secret. Confidence is not a feeling, it is a performance. A manipulator knows that a lie spoken with unshakable conviction will, in most cases, defeat a truth spoken with hesitation. The mechanism for this is simple. A real expert often knows what they don't know. They understand nuance and complexity. As a result, they will use hedge words. This is likely the case, the data suggests. This real expertise sounds weak and uncertain. A manipulator, on the other hand, deals in absolutes. This is the truth. This is the only way. They deliver this lie with the performance of confidence. Unwavering eye contact. Topic 2. A controlled, downward inflecting tone of voice. No uptalk, and high power posture. Topic 32. Our brains, forced to choose between a hesitant truth and a confident lie, will almost always follow the confident lie. Why? Because doubt is contagious, but so is conviction. The manipulator's certainty feels like safety, leadership, and authority. It calms our anxiety. This is the weapon of the con artist, who projects an aura of inevitable success to lure victims into impossible schemes. It is the weapon of the toxic leader, who projects absolute certainty to silence dissent and make their followers fall in line. The crowd believes not because of the facts, which are often against the manipulator, but because of the sheer, unblinking force of the delivery. It proves that in the battlefield of influence, the performance of certainty will tragically defeat the truth almost every time. 89. The Curated Past. Weaponizing selective memory recall. Selective memory recall is the weapon of rewriting history. This is not simple lying. It is a far more insidious and effective form of gaslighting. The manipulator doesn't invent new facts. They curate the truth. They act as a biased historian, deliberately highlighting every fragment of the past that supports their narrative while burying everything that challenges it. This weapon exploits a critical vulnerability. Human memory is not a video recording. It is a fragile, reconstructive process. Every time we remember something, we are rebuilding it, and it can be influenced. A manipulator exploits this fragility by presenting their curated version with such confidence. Topic 88. That they make you question your own recollections. The most common tactic is the negative ledger. In an argument, a manipulator will selectively recall a perfect, detailed list of every mistake you have ever made, every flaw, every moment of weakness. It's a greatest hits of your failures. But when you counter with their mistakes, they will conveniently develop strategic amnesia. I never did that. That's not how I remember it. You're exaggerating. This creates a double standard ledger. Your side is filled with unforgivable debts. Their side is blank. This is a form of emotional blackmail. A partner may remember every time you disappointed them, while erasing every sacrifice you made. You are left in a no-win situation, constantly apologizing for a past you can't change, against a distorted timeline that was rigged from the start. On a macro scale, this is how political leaders control the narrative, glorifying certain victories while erasing or forgetting massive failures. The devastating power is that it uses reality. It just weaponizes the gaps between what's remembered and what's forgotten. And in those gaps, truth is lost and control is gained. 90. The too good to be true assault. Love bombing as psychological warfare. Love bombing is not affection. It is psychological warfare disguised as a fairy tale. It is the shock and awe campaign of the emotional manipulator, a tactic designed to overwhelm, disarm, and secure total psychological submission. This weapon is deployed at the very beginning of a relationship, a torrential flood of affirmation, admiration, and attention so intense that it bypasses all logical defenses. The manipulator's goal is to accelerate intimacy at an unnatural speed, creating an immediate and powerful trauma bond. This tactic works because it exploits the deepest, most primal human need, the desire to be seen, to be valued, and to be unconditionally loved. The love bomber mirrors their target's desires, becoming the soulmate they've always dreamed of. They shower the victim with constant texts, extravagant gifts, and most potently, future faking. They will talk of marriage, children, and growing old together within weeks, or even days. This isn't a sign of love. It's the creation of an anchor. This overwhelming flood of positive reinforcement does two things. First, it triggers a massive neurochemical high, flooding the victim's brain with dopamine, the reward chemical, and oxytocin, the bonding chemical. The victim becomes, quite literally, addicted to the manipulator. Second, it establishes a baseline of perfection. The manipulator creates a golden age so euphoric that when the inevitable next phase begins, the victim will do anything to get it back. This is the setup. Once the manipulator feels the victim is hooked, they abruptly withdraw the drug. The love bombing phase ends, and the devaluation phase begins. The texts stop. The praise turns to criticism. The perfect partner becomes cold and distant. The victim's brain, now in a state of neurochemical withdrawal, panics. They don't see the manipulator as the cause of their pain. They see them as the only cure. They obsess. What did I do wrong? How do I fix this? They are now trapped, willing to sacrifice their boundaries, their friends, and their identity, all in a desperate chase to regain that first, perfect, manufactured high. 91. The too far to turn back trap, weaponizing the sunk cost fallacy. The sunk cost fallacy is a psychological weapon that turns your own history into a prison. It is the deep, irrational bias that convinces you to continue an endeavor simply because you have already invested time, money, or emotion into it, even when it is proven to be a losing battle. This fallacy is not just a simple mistake in logic. It is a cognitive trap that manipulators exploit to ensure your compliance. The weapon works by hijacking our profound, almost allergic, aversion to loss. Our brains are not wired to be rational. They are wired to rationalize our past decisions. To quit or walk away is to admit a loss. It forces us to accept that a past version of ourselves made a mistake, that our suffering, our effort, or our money was for nothing. This creates a state of intense cognitive dissonance. To avoid this psychological pain, we choose the easier path. We lie to ourselves. We invent a new narrative. If I just stay a little longer, it will turn around. It's just a rough patch, or I've already come this far. We would rather gamble on a future miracle than admit a past failure. A manipulator does not need to chain you. Your own investments become the shackles. This is the engine of a casino. The gambler, down thousands of dollars, doesn't walk away. They are trapped by their sunk cost, believing the next hand must be the one that saves them. In business, it's the failing project that gets more funding, not less, because we've already spent millions. But its most devastating use is in toxic relationships. This fallacy is the glue that holds them together. The victim thinks, I've already given him 10 years of my life. I can't just leave now and have it all be for nothing. The manipulator no longer has to actively control them. They just have to remind them. They will weaponize the past, saying, after everything we've been through, you're just going to give up. The brilliance of this tactic is that the victim does all the work. They build their own cage, and the manipulator simply holds the key, which is forged from the victim's own unrecoverable past. 92. The guilty mirror. Projection as an offensive weapon. Projection is a psychological weapon that serves as both a shield and a spear. It is a primal Freudian defense mechanism twisted into an insidious form of offensive warfare. At its core, projection is the act of a manipulator unconsciously, or often consciously, attributing their own unacceptable thoughts, flaws, feelings, or motives onto another person. It is, in effect, a confession disguised as an accusation. The manipulator, psychologically unable to face their own shame, inadequacy, or deceit, must expel these feelings. They cannot live with the cognitive dissonance of who they are versus who they pretend to be. Therefore, they must see their own flaws in you. This mechanism serves two devastating purposes. First, it acts as a pressure release valve, relieving the manipulator of the psychological burden of their own guilt. By making you the liar or the cheat, they get to preserve their own self-image as the honest or faithful one. Second, it is a brilliant frame control tactic that throws the victim into a state of profound defensive chaos. The accusation is often so specific and so contradicted to the victim's reality that it feels like a targeted assault from an alternate dimension. The unfaithful partner becomes obsessed with their partner's infidelity, checking their phone and demanding their location. The pathological liar accuses everyone else of being secretive and dishonest. The power-hungry manager, deeply insecure about their own competence, will accuse their most talented subordinate of trying to steal their job or being a glory seeker. The victim is now trapped in a perfect no-win Kafka trap. If they deny the accusation, "I'm not cheating," their impassioned defense is twisted and used as proof of their guilt. "You're so defensive. You must be hiding. You must be hiding something." If they remain silent, their silence is taken as an admission. The conversation is no longer about the manipulator's actual behavior. It has been successfully redirected to the victim's character. The victim is forced to fight a shadow, endlessly defending themselves against a crime they not only didn't commit, but one that the accuser is actively committing themselves. 93. The Unwinnable Race. Moving the goalposts as a control tactic. Moving the goalposts is a psychological weapon of perpetual failure. It is an unwinnable, sadistic race designed to trap the victim in a state of endless striving and profound inadequacy. The manipulator sets a condition for their approval, love, or for the end of the conflict. The victim, believing a solution is finally in sight, pours all their energy into meeting that one specific condition. But the moment they cross the finish line, they found only silence. The goalpost is immediately and silently moved. The victory is not acknowledged, it is disqualified, and a new, more difficult set of criteria is presented. This tactic is a hallmark of the narcissistic boss or partner. In the workplace, the boss says, "I need you to land this new client. If you do that, you're on the fast track for a promotion." The employee works nights, weekends, and sacrifices their well-being. They land the customers. They entered the boss's office, expecting praise, only to be met with a neutral expression and a new demand. "Good. Now, you need to show you can manage them. Your real test will be the quarterly review. And frankly, your internal reports have been a little sloppy." The success is minimized, and a new, harder goalpost appears. In a relationship, the manipulator says, "We argue so much because we're struggling with money. If you just get that raise, everything will be fine." The partner works for a year, gets the raise, and announces the good news. The manipulator's response: "That's it? I thought it would be more. And now you're working so late, you've become selfish. If you really loved me, you'd find a job that values work-life balance." The goalpost has moved from financial to emotional, from success to presence. The victim is now, by definition, failing at the new goal. This weapon's power lies in its exploitation of the sunk cost fallacy. Topic 91. The victim, having already sacrificed so much, thinks, "I can't quit now. I'm so close." They are psychologically chained to the hope of a finish line that the manipulator has no intention of ever providing. The striving, not the achieving, is what the manipulator desires, as it keeps the victim in a state of permanent controllable submission. 94. The invisible cage. Engineering learned helplessness. Learned helplessness is not just a tactic. It is the endgame. It is the psychological checkmate. The complete and total erosion of a victim's will to resist. It is a state of profound passivity and depression engineered by a manipulator who, through sustained, inescapable psychological torture, teaches the victim that resistance is futile. When the victim finally stops fighting back, even when the cage door is wide open, the manipulator has achieved absolute control. This concept was scientifically codified by psychologist Martin Seligman in his harrowing 1967 experiments. He exposed dogs to electric shocks. A group of dogs can press a lever to stop the shock. The second group had no control. The shocks were random and unavoidable. Both groups were then placed in a new shuttle box, where they could easily escape the shock by jumping over a low barrier. The first group jumped. The second group, the one that had learned their actions were meaningless, simply laid down and whimpered, accepting the pain, even with freedom literally one step away. A human manipulator replicates this experiment perfectly. They create a shuttle box in their home or office. The shocks are not electric. They are emotional, verbal, and psychological. This is done through a systematic recipe. Step 1. Random, intermittent reinforcement. Topic 46. The manipulator makes all rewards and punishments unpredictable. A behavior that earns praise one day, e.g., making dinner, earns explosive rage the next. Step 2. Gaslighting and contradiction planting. Topic 7 and 74. The victim tries to use logic to find a pattern to survive. The manipulator physics destroys this logic, telling them that never happened, or you're the one who's crazy. The victim's brain, desperate to find a lever to press, burns itself out. When it finds no pattern, no cause and effect, it shuts down. The victim learns that their choices, their thoughts, and their actions are meaningful. This is the state of learned helplessness. The victim becomes passive, compliant, and unable to make even simple decisions. Friends and family will scream, "Just leave him," or "Just quit that job." They cannot understand that the victim is no longer psychologically capable of seeing the open door. They have been taught that the cage is everywhere. 95. The aggressive martyr. Weaponizing victimhood. Weaponized victimhood is one of the most masterful and infuriating tactics in the dark psychology playbook. It is a form of aggressive martyrdom, a sophisticated frame control technique where the manipulator, who is often the actual aggressor, seizes the moral high ground by co-opting the identity of the victim. They don't just claim to be a victim. They use that claim as a sword to deflect accountability, silence their critics, and justify their own cruel behavior. This tactic is a direct offensive application of DARVO, deny, attack, and reverse victim and offender. When confronted with their own bad behavior, the manipulator will immediately reframe the conversation. Their response is not one of remorse, but of indignation. "How dare you attack me right now? Don't you know how much stress I'm under? Or I only yelled because you pushed me to it with your constant nagging. I'm the one who has to put up with your behavior." In this single move, the real victim has been recast as the offender. And the real offender is now the long-suffering martyr. This weapon works by holding empathy hostage. It specifically targets compassionate, decent people who are wired to protect the underdog and feel guilty for kicking someone when they're down. The manipulator knows this. They bleed all over their target, using a noble wound, topic 41, or a past trauma as a permanent get-out-of-jail-free card. Any attempt to hold them accountable is met with a flood of tears or a long-suffering sigh, reframing your request for basic respect as an act of cruelty. In a group dynamic, this person will use their victim status to demand concessions, silence dissent, and control the group's resources. Anyone who objects is immediately branded as heartless or unsupportive, effectively using guilt by association, topic 45, to silence the entire group. It is the perfect crime. They get to inflict pain while simultaneously harvesting sympathy for being the one in pain. 96. The Boiling Frog. The weapon of gradual desensitization. The boiling frog is a psychological weapon of gradualism. It is the tactic of normalizing the absurd through a slow, imperceptible escalation of abuse and control. The metaphor is chilling. If you drop a frog into a pot of boiling water, it will immediately sense the danger and leap out. But if you place it in a pot of lukewarm water and slowly, degree by degree, turn up the heat, the frog will fail to register the lethal threat. It will acclimate to the rising temperature until it is, quite literally, boiled alive. A manipulator uses this precise method of desensitization to dismantle a victim's boundaries. They never start with the boiling behavior. The narcissist is not a monster on the first date. The toxic boss is not a tyrant in the job interview. The water is warm and inviting. This is the love bombing, topic 90 phase. Then, the heat ticks up 1 degree. It's a small violation, something you can easily brush off. A playful neg, topic 6. That stings, a harmless lie. A request that isolates you from a friend, framed as, I just want to spend more time with you. Because you are still in the warm water, you rationalize it. I'm just being sensitive. They're just passionate. You climb it. The violation becomes the new baseline. Now, the manipulator has a new higher starting point to escalate from. The heat goes up another degree. The neg becomes a direct insult. The request becomes a demand. The jealousy becomes surveillance. But because this new behavior is only 1 degree worse than the last baseline, which you already rationalized, you find a way to rationalize this too. This is the foot in the door technique. Topic 13. Applied to psychological abuse. Your internal alarm system has been systematically dismantled. You are so focused on adjusting to the current temperature that you fail to see the pattern of the rising temperature. Friends and family who are outside the pot are horrified. They are touching the boiling water and can't understand why you won't just jump out. But you can't. You have been slowly, methodically, and finally normalized. 97. The Siege of Reality. Engineering the echo chamber. The echo chamber is the fortress of the manipulator. It is psychological isolation. Topic 75, made offensive. A simple isolation tactic is about removing a victim's support network. The echo chamber is far more insidious. It is about replacing that network with a new, curated reality where every voice, every opinion, and every piece of evidence is controlled by or validates the manipulator. This is a siege of perception. The goal is to create a totalizing environment where the manipulator's truth is the only truth. This is the classic cult leader playbook, scaled down to a personal relationship. Step 1. Isolate. The manipulator, using triangulation, topic 24, frames the victim's friends and family as toxic, jealous, or brainwashed. Step 2. Replace. They introduce the victim to their friends, who are often flying monkeys or enablers. They immerse the victim in their social group. Step 3. Control information. The manipulator curates the victim's reality. In the digital age, this is terrifyingly easy. They filter the news, the social media, and the information the victim consumes, framing everything to fit their narrative. Step 4. Weaponize social proof. Now the victim is inside the fortress. When they question the manipulator's logic, the manipulator doesn't have to defend themselves. They can outsource their proof to the echo chamber. Don't you see? Everyone here agrees with me. All our friends know this is the truth. The victim is now facing a unanimous crowd, a false consensus. Topic 79. This manufactured social proof, topic 17, is devastating. The victim, now cut off from any dissenting voice, begins to deeply doubt their own sanity. How can I be the only one who sees this? Maybe I am the crazy one. Inside this chamber, the repetition effect, topic 43, becomes all-powerful. The manipulator's lies are echoing back by the friends and the curated evidence until they solidify into truth. The victim is no longer just a hostage. They have become a believer, actively defending the walls of their own prison. 98. The ghost attack. The power of plausible deniability. Plausible deniability is the art of the ghost attack. It is the shield that makes the manipulator's spear invisible. This weapon is the engine that powers covert intimidation. Topic 70. Strategic ambiguity. Topic 15. And negging. Topic 6. It is the craft of engineering a two-level message. One level, the text, is innocent, while the second level, the subtext, is a clear, malicious attack. This gives the manipulator a built-in escape hatch, allowing them to always claim the innocent interpretation, and in doing so, gaslight the victim for reacting to the actual, hidden, attack. The manipulator never says the quiet part out loud. Instead of a direct threat, "Don't apply for that job," they use a veiled threat. Wow, that's a big risk. It would be a shame if something unexpected happened to our family's stability right now. The subtext is clear. I will make your life hell. But the text is just concerned advice. If the victim confronts them, "Are you threatening me?" the manipulator immediately triggers the gaslighting. Topic 7. Escape hatch. What? No, I'm just worried about you. Why are you so paranoid? You're twisting my words. The victim is now on the defensive, apologizing for misunderstanding the very attack that was just leveled against them. This tactic thrives on jokes that aren't jokes. The manipulator will use a neg. "That dress is surprisingly nice on you, for your size." And when the victim flinches, they will immediately invoke plausible deniability. "I was just kidding. Why are you so sensitive?" The joke frame becomes the perfect delivery system for cruelty, as it blames the victim for their own pain. The victim is trapped. If they take the joke, they absorb the poison. If they don't take the joke, they are no fun and can't handle the banter. This weapon is psychologically exhausting. It forces the victim to live in the subtext, constantly decoding hidden meanings, while the manipulator remains safe in the innocent text. It is a ghost attack because the victim feels the wound, but cannot prove the existence of the knife. 99. The public cage. Weaponizing the public commitment trap. The public commitment trap is a masterful, high-stakes application of the consistency principle. Topics 21 and 29. It is a tactic that moves the battlefield from the private sphere to the public one, weaponizing a person's ego and social reputation against them. A manipulator understands that while we hate being privately inconsistent, we are disenchanted of being publicly inconsistent. To do so is to invite social judgment, to be seen as a hypocrite, a liar, or a flake. This tactic is not just foot in the door. It is engineering that first step to be taken on a stage, with an audience. The manipulator tricks or coaxes the victim into making a public declaration of support, loyalty, or belief. Once this public statement is made, it becomes a psychological contract written in stone. The victim is now trapped by their own words. In a toxic relationship, the manipulator will love bomb the victim, and during this high, encourages them to post gushing declarations of love on social media. Or in front of friends and family, they will set a trap with a public question. "Honey, tell everyone how I'm the best thing that ever happened to you." The victim, in the warmth of the moment, complies. The trap is now set. Months later, when the abuse has begun, and the victim is desperate to leave, the manipulator will deploy this weapon. "You can't leave. What will you tell your family? You told them I was the best thing that ever happened to you." You'll look like a fool in a toxic workplace. A boss will ask an employee to give a glowing testimonial for the company website, or to lead the charge for a new initiative at an all-hands meeting. The employee is now the public face of that initiative. When they later realize the initiative is flawed or exploitative, they are silenced. To speak out would be to publicly humiliate themselves and contradict their own leadership. The manipulator has successfully used the victim's own reputation as a gag. 100. The Final Shackle. How trauma bonding makes a hostage love their captor. Trauma bonding is the endgame of psychological manipulation. It is not a tactic, it is the result. It is the final devastating shackle that binds a victim to their abuser, a bond forged not despite the abuse, but because of it. It is a profound, paradoxical attachment that exploits our most primitive survival instincts, biochemically addicting the victim to the very person who is destroying them. This bond is the tragic, logical conclusion of intermittent reinforcement, topic 46, and controlled unpredictability, topic 55. It is a systematic, four-stage cycle. Stage 1, love bombing, topic 90. The manipulator creates a golden age of intense adoration, connection, and perfect love. This high floods the victim's brain with dopamine, the reward chemical, and oxytocin, the bonding chemical. This creates a powerful, addictive neurological anchor. Stage 2, devaluation and abuse. The manipulator suddenly withdraws all warmth. The love is replaced with gaslighting. Topic 7, the silent treatment. Topic 31, or emotional flooding. Topic 47. This puts the victim's brain into a state of intense withdrawal and panic. Their system floods with the stress hormone, cortisol. Stage 3. The cruel kind cycle. This is the key. The manipulator, seeing the victim in a state of desperation, deliberately offers a small, unpredictable crumb of kindness. A brief apology, a good day, a single compliment. This crumb is not love. It is the temporary cessation of pain. Stage 4. The neurological misfire. This is the bond. The victim's brain, starved and desperate, receives this crumb of kindness. This pause in the abuse allows the cortisol, stress, to recede at the exact same time a tiny hit of dopamine, reward, is released. The brain makes a catastrophic misassociation. It misinterprets the feeling of relief from pain as the feeling of love and safety. The victim becomes addicted not to the person, but to the cycle of relief. This is, quite literally, Stockholm Syndrome in a domestic setting. The victim is now bonded to the source of their pain, because that source has also become their only perceived source of relief. They will defend their captors, isolate themselves from help, and sacrifice their own survival, all to get another hit from the very person poisoning them.